Corvin pulled Selene onto the balcony with firm hands, moving her away from the open doors just seconds before danger closed in. His breath came slow, but his voice shook for the first time since she met him. "You stay with me. I am not losing you tonight." The city lights behind them stayed still, but everything between them shifted. His guard dropped. His focus narrowed to one thing, one person. Her. She looked up at him, shaken, confused, and trying to understand how a man known for keeping distance now held her with a level of care she had never felt before. In that moment, fear stood close, but something stronger stepped in. This was the night everything changed. Have you ever crossed paths with someone who stepped in before you even knew you needed help? Someone whose presence felt steady at a time when your voice shook? Many people know what it feels like to face trouble alone, to report a problem and be ignored, or to stand in fear with no one listening. Selene lived through that. She tried to speak up. She tried to do the right thing, but the world around her brushed her aside. So when Corvin, a man known for cold silence and strict rules, placed himself between her and danger without hesitation, it raised a question many viewers can connect with. Why does help sometimes come from the most unexpected person? Selene witnessed a crime that placed her life in danger, yet no one believed her. Not the officer at the desk, not the people who should have helped. She was dismissed, ignored, and left to face fear alone. Corvin saw what others missed. He saw the risk in her story, the danger in her silence, and the truth behind her shaken voice. He stepped in with full force, placing his own safety on the line. A powerful man, feared by many, chose to shield a woman he barely knew. A deadly threat moved closer. A kiss later broke through the cold walls he lived behind. Their lives collided through fear, truth, and a moment that neither of them expected. So the question becomes clear. Is love stronger than fear when danger stands close? What makes a man like Corvin step away from every rule he lived by? And why did Selene, a quiet woman who trusted no one, place her safety and her heart in his hands? This story opens doors to choices, risks, and the kind of connection that grows in moments when two people face something bigger than themselves. Their journey will show how truth can guide two strangers toward a bond that neither planned for, yet both needed. Welcome to Lord of Hearts. Thank you for joining this story. Whether you are new here or you have been with us before, your time means a lot. Settle in and let the story guide you, because what you are about to hear carries lessons about trust, courage, and the strength that grows when two lives cross paths at the right moment. Here, every story holds truth. Every moment carries meaning. And every character has something to teach us about life. Before we begin, please support the channel by subscribing. Your support helps us share more stories that lift the heart, teach quiet lessons, and remind people everywhere that hope still matters. Drop a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and stay with us to the end. Corvin started each morning the same way. He entered his building before the sun rose, passed through a lobby that stayed quiet, by design, and walked into halls where no one spoke unless he asked a question. His steps were steady, his eyes sharp, and every person he passed straightened their posture without thinking. His office sat at the highest floor, at the end of a long corridor where no sound carried, no laughter, no small talk, no movement unless he allowed it. He set those rules himself. He liked order, simple days, and tasks that ended in clear results. Corvin kept his desk free of clutter. He kept his schedule tight. He spoke only when needed. The people who worked for him knew he disliked surprises and valued silence. They called him steady. They called him strict. Some called him cold, but no one questioned him. This was the world Corvin built, and he kept every door closed to anything that could Corvin's life looked full from the outside. Meetings, reports, clients, numbers, decisions. Every hour held something. Yet the space inside him stayed empty. He moved through his days with purpose, but without warmth. He kept people at a distance, not because he disliked them, but because closeness never brought him anything good in the past. He avoided personal questions. He avoided after-work events. He avoided anything that hinted at connection. Staff learned not to ask about his evenings or his weekends. They learned not to comment on the long nights he spent in the building. Corvin returned to an apartment that felt neat but hollow. No family photos, no soft colors, no voice waiting for him. He never complained. He preferred it this way. Loneliness did not scare him. It made sense to him. It kept life simple, safe, predictable. He built barriers around his emotions long ago, and he protected those barriers, the same way he protected his clients, with full force and no hesitation. Corvin's company stood as one of the most trusted private security firms in the country. High-profile clients walked through his doors with confidence because they knew he delivered results without delay or excuses. Every contract came with weight. Every case demanded sharp judgment. His staff worked fast because Corvin set the pace. He reviewed reports with a trained eye, caught risks before others saw them, and expected the same level of focus from everyone under him. A single mistake could cost a client their safety, and Corvin treated that possibility as unacceptable. He handled threats involving public figures, business leaders, and people whose lives attracted danger. His name alone ended disputes. His presence in a meeting made people choose their words carefully. Pressure followed him, but he carried it without pause. His company's success rested on his calm mind and strict standards, and he never allowed the weight to show. This was the world he mastered, intense, demanding, and built on control. Corvin never raised his voice, yet people hurried to meet his expectations. He didn't need to threaten anyone. His silence carried more force than anger ever could. One glance from him told a person when they crossed a line. One pause in his tone told his staff when to correct their course. Clients followed his lead without question. They trusted him with their families, their businesses, and their lives. Guards who trained under him stood straighter when he walked by. Officers from other agencies respected his judgment even when they disagreed with him. Inside his building, the atmosphere changed whenever he entered a room. Conversations stopped. People focused. The air grew tight, not from fear of harm, but from fear of disappointing a man known for precision. Corvin earned that respect through years of consistent results. He solved problems without noise. He made quick decisions. He delivered solutions others failed to see. People trusted him. People feared him. And most importantly, people understood that Corvin never let emotion guide him. Until Selene. Corvin lived by one personal rule that shaped every choice he made. No attachments. He avoided close bonds because they created weakness in his line of work. Anyone tied to him could become a target. Anyone who mattered could be used against him. He learned this early, and he never forgot it. His staff knew he kept to himself. No shared lunches. No personal calls. No visitors. No one outside work saw him as anything more than a powerful man who preferred distance. He never dated. He never entertained attention. He shut down interest with a single look, a short nod, or a firm redirect. Clients tried to draw him into conversation about his life, but he never gave more than one-word replies. Keeping people out made his days clean, orderly, predictable, no surprises, no risks, no broken trust. For years, this rule held strong. It protected him. It protected his work. But that rule began to shift the moment Selene Ward stepped into his world. While Corvin lived inside walls of steel and silence, Selene moved. Through a quiet routine shaped by compassion rather than control. She worked at a legal clinic that served people with limited resources. Her days involved calm conversations with clients who needed guidance, drafting, letters for court, and offering comfort to people who carried heavy stories. Her life was modest but peaceful. She walked to work each morning, stopping by a small coffee shop where she ordered the same drink and always greeted the staff with a warm smile. Her apartment was small, tucked in a quiet part of town, filled with soft colors and second-hand furniture she kept clean. She didn't chase attention. She didn't look for chaos. She kept her circle small and found comfort in routine. At night, she read on her couch, answered messages from a few friends, and prepared for another day of helping strangers. She lived a simple life that rarely changed. until the day she saw something that pulled her into danger she never sought. The crime moment, she sees the man flee, the cracked phone, stained shirt. Selene stepped out of the clinic late that evening. She locked the door, adjusted the strap of her bag, and headed toward the streetlights. The night felt normal until she heard fast footsteps behind her. She turned just as a man rushed past, almost bumping her shoulder. His eyes were wide with panic. His shirt carried dark stains that made her freeze. His hand gripped a phone with a cracked screen as though he dropped it during a struggle. He didn't look at her. He only kept running, disappearing around the corner without slowing down. Selene stood still, heart racing. She didn't know who he was or what he had done, but every part of her body told her something was wrong. She walked to the edge of the street and saw flashing lights far down the block. People gathered. Voices rose in confusion. She made a choice in that moment. She reported what she saw, thinking she had helped someone, thinking the truth would matter. She had no idea that her life had shifted in the span of a few seconds. Selene walked into the nearest police station with steady steps, still shaken but determined to share what she witnessed. She told the officer at the front desk about the man who ran past her, the stains on his shirt, the cracked phone, and the direction he fled. The officer listened for a moment, typed a few words, then leaned back in his chair. He asked if she was sure. He asked if the light could have played tricks on her eyes. He asked if she mixed up details because she was tired. Every question felt like a wall placed in her path. Selene tried again, explaining the fear in the man's face and the urgency in his steps. She hoped someone would take her words seriously. Instead, the officer nodded in a way that felt dismissive and thanked her for coming in. No one asked her to sit. No one took a full statement. No one walked her through next steps. She left the station with a knot in her chest, wondering why truth sounded so heavy when no one wanted to hear it. That night, she walked home with a quiet sense of unease she couldn't shake. The next morning, Selene stepped outside her apartment and noticed a dark sedan parked across the street. The windows were tinted and the engine stayed on. She tried to ignore it at first. Cars parked on the street all the time, but when she returned from work that evening, the same car sat in the same place, idling quietly. She walked past it quickly, gripping her keys. No door opened. No one called out to her. Yet the presence of that car settled deep inside her mind. The following night, her phone rang while she prepared dinner. She answered, expecting a friend or a client from the clinic. Instead, silence filled the line. No breathing, no background noise, nothing. She said, hello, twice. The call ended. The next night, it happened again. One ring, one click. Silence. Her worry grew into something sharper. She couldn't explain why she felt watched, but every step she took carried tension. She checked the locks more than once. She pulled her curtains closed. Her simple life no longer felt steady. Something had shifted around her, and she felt alone with it, until her boss stepped in with a name she had never heard before, Corvin Hale. Selene arrived at the clinic the next morning with tired eyes and a subtle shake in her hands. Her boss noticed. He asked her to step into his office, closed the door, and told her to sit. She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but when she finally spoke about the car, the silent calls, and the officer who dismissed her, his expression changed. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small card with a single address written in sharp ink. No logo, no title, just an address that carried weight. In the quiet way he handed it to her. This is someone who helps when no one else will, he said. He deals with problems people don't understand. Go today. Don't wait. Selene held the card with both hands. Who is he? She asked. Someone who fixes trouble, her boss replied. He won't ignore you. She left the clinic with her heart pounding, unsure of what waited for her at that address. She only knew one thing for certain. She could not face this fear alone anymore. That decision led her to the tall glass building, where Corvin Hale waited behind doors that rarely opened for anyone. Selene stood at the base of the tall glass tower, holding the small card her boss had given her. The building stretched upward in clean lines, quiet and controlled, much like the man she was about to meet. Guards stood near the entrance, dressed in dark uniforms, their faces steady. They watched everything without seeming to move their eyes. Selene walked toward the doors with a mix of fear and hope. She explained her reason for visiting. The guard checked the card, then nodded and directed her to a private elevator. The doors closed behind her with a soft click, sealing her inside a space that felt heavier with each passing floor. When the elevator opened, she stepped into a hallway, unlike anything she had seen before. No artwork, no noise, only calm lighting and doors spaced far apart. It felt like stepping into another world, one ruled by someone who preferred order over comfort. At the end of the hallway, an assistant waited for her. "Mr. Hale will see you," she said. Selene followed her through another set of doors and saw Corvin for the first time, standing by his desk with a presence that filled the room before he spoke a single word. Corvin didn't sit. He didn't offer a smile. He didn't even greet her with small talk. He looked at Selene once, then at the file on his desk that held only her name and a brief note from her boss. "Sit," he said, voice firm but calm. Selene obeyed without thinking. Corvin stepped closer, eyes scanning her posture, her breathing, the tension in her shoulders. He studied people the way others studied documents. Fast, precise, unfiltered. "You witnessed something," he said. "Your report was dismissed. You are being watched. Your calls are being tracked. That is why you're here." He didn't ask questions. He stated what he believed to be true, and his confidence startled her. Selene tried to explain, but he raised a hand slightly. "Start from the moment the man ran past you." She spoke, and Corvin listened with the same focus he used on high-risk clients. He didn't interrupt. He didn't soften his expression. He processed her story at a speed she could feel in the shift of his gaze. When she finished, he closed the file with slow, controlled movements. "You were right to come," he said, voice clipped and steady. He made that judgment without hesitation, without doubt, and without needing to hear more. This was Corvin Hale, cold at first glance, sharp at every angle. As Selene finished speaking, she folded her hands in her lap to steady them. She pressed her fingers together, hoping he wouldn't see the slight tremble. But Corvin's eyes missed nothing. He watched her hands for a brief moment, long enough to understand the fear she tried to cover. Selene caught the shift in his gaze and pulled her hands closer to her stomach, hiding them behind her bag. "You're not safe," Corvin said quietly. His tone changed. Less sharp, more controlled, different from the cold introduction. He wasn't looking at her story anymore. He was looking at her. The fear she carried. The effort she made to stay composed. "Did anyone follow you here?" he asked. Selene shook her head. "I don't think so. I checked twice before entering the street." "You think," he repeated, not unkindly, but with the weight of someone who dealt with danger often. "That is why your hands are shaking." Selene looked down, embarrassed. "I'm fine," she whispered. Corvin didn't believe that. She could tell, but he didn't push her. Not yet. It was the first moment he allowed something softer to slip through. Concern. Not as a leader, but as a man standing close enough to see her fear. Corvin walked around the desk and stood in front of her, closer than before. The distance he normally kept from everyone shifted. He didn't fold his arms. He didn't stand tall to intimidate. He lowered his voice instead. "You're not alone here," he said. Selene looked up, surprised. It wasn't what she expected from a man known for silence and distance. His tone held something she couldn't name, but it eased the tightness in her chest. Corvin rarely allowed emotion to touch his words. He didn't soften his voice for clients or staff. But seeing the fear she tried to hide pulled something out of him that he didn't plan for. He reached for a chair and placed it closer to her, letting her sit with more comfort. This was small, but for a man like Corvin, it was a shift, a quiet breach in the walls he built for years. Selene didn't know it yet, but this was the moment his steady guard began to fall. Not because he wanted it to, but because her silence and courage forced him to see her differently from anyone who walked into his office before. Corvin straightened slightly, the softness in his tone shifting into firm direction. He reached for a tablet on his desk and began typing fast, issuing instructions without raising his voice. Every order he sent carried weight. "You will not return to your apartment tonight," he said. "The calls, the car, the dismissed report. These are not small incidents." Selene opened her mouth to speak, but he held her gaze. "I'm handling this now." He tapped another command. 2 guards appeared at the door within seconds, silent but alert. Corvin didn't look at them. "You will escort her out when I tell you," he said. Selene watched him, confused by the speed of his decisions. "Is it that serious?" she asked. Corvin paused only long enough to answer, "Yes." He didn't make room for doubt. He didn't soften his certainty. He took responsibility for her safety as if it were already his duty. In that moment, Selene felt the shift. Her fear didn't vanish, but it no longer stood alone. Someone else carried it with her, without hesitation, without question. Corvin Hale had taken charge of her safety completely. Corvin turned back to Selene, his expression steady and unreadable. He spoke with calm certainty, the kind that didn't need volume to carry force. "You came here for help," he said, "and I protect what enters my office." The words were simple, but they hit her with unexpected weight. No one had spoken to her with that level of assurance before. Not the police, not the people who brushed off her report, not even the friends who thought she worried too much. Selene held his gaze. "You don't even know me," she said softly. Corvin didn't blink. "I don't need to know you to do what's right." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't comfort. It was a statement he lived by, a line drawn, a commitment made without hesitation. Selene felt something loosen in her chest, something she hadn't felt in days. Relief, mixed with a faint sense of safety she didn't expect to find in a stranger's office. This was the moment she realized Corvin wasn't helping out of duty or obligation. This was personal for him now, even if he didn't acknowledge it yet. Corvin returned to his desk with controlled steps and pulled up several security feeds and communication logs. His fingers moved fast across the screen, pulling information from sources Selene didn't recognize. Every action he took reinforced one truth: he was already deep into protecting her. He sent a message to his team. Block access to her building, no entry without verification. Another command followed. Trace her recent calls. I want full records. Within moments, updates flashed across his screen. Someone had tried to reach her 3 times from a line that didn't match any registered personal or business number. Corvin's jaw tightened. 2 guards stood outside the office, ready. Corvin nodded toward the door without looking at them. "You stay with her until she leaves this floor." Selene watched all of this unfold, feeling small under the weight of his precision and speed. "You don't have to do all this," she said quietly. Corvin turned toward her. "Yes, I do." There was no room for argument. His actions showed it clearly. Her safety was no longer a request he was considering. It was already a mission he had taken on. Corvin picked up his phone and pressed a single button. "Prepare the top floor suite," he said. Now, he ended the call before anyone responded. Selene opened her mouth to object, but he spoke first. "You will stay here tonight," he said. "The top floor is secure. No one gets access without going through me." Selene hesitated. "I don't want to inconvenience you." Corvin stepped closer, his tone firm but not harsh. "This isn't about convenience, it's about safety." He motioned to the guards. "Escort her to the elevator. I will follow." Selene stood and gathered her bag. The guards walked ahead, creating a barrier around her as they moved through the hall. Corvin followed behind, close enough to intervene if needed. When the elevator opened to the top floor, Selene stepped into a quiet space filled with warm lighting, soft furniture, and clean lines. It was simple but calming, designed to give anyone inside a sense of peace. Corvin walked past her and checked the locks, the windows, and the hallway cameras. "No one comes up here," he said. "You're safe." For the first time in days, Selene felt her breath ease. And for the first time in years, Corvin allowed someone into a place he kept private, Once the guards stepped out and the door locked behind them, the room fell into a calm silence. Selene placed her bag on the table and looked around, unsure of where to stand or what to say. Corvin stayed near the entrance for a moment, checking one last alert on his device before turning toward her. "You should rest," he said. His voice was still controlled, but the edge had eased. Selene nodded, though her thoughts remained tangled. She walked toward the small seating area, running her fingers lightly along the back of the chair. Corvin watched her for a second longer than he meant to. "You're safe here," he added. Those words settled over her with quiet warmth. She wasn't used to someone stating it so plainly, with that level of certainty. Corvin stepped farther into the suite and placed a bottle of water on the table beside her. Not a command, not a gesture of control. Just a small act of care he didn't draw attention to. Selene sat down. Corvin stood a few steps away, not wanting to make her feel crowded. Yet the room didn't feel tense. It felt balanced, as if both of them were adjusting to the strange comfort of being in the same space. She caught him watching her once, his expression unreadable. He looked away quickly, but she noticed. This was the beginning of something neither of them planned, quiet moments where fear softened and connection began to take shape. Hours passed. Selene settled on the couch with a blanket pulled over her legs, while Corvin sat at the small desk in the corner of the suite, reviewing reports and answering messages from his team. His focus never drifted, yet his presence felt different from earlier, less distant, less guarded. Selene watched him from where she sat, her cheek resting against the cushion. She expected him to leave once she was settled, but he stayed. He worked quietly, not wanting to disturb her, though she sensed he remained in the room for more than professional duty. Every so often, he checked the camera feed on his device, scanning for any sign of threat. After confirming everything was clear, he returned to the documents in front of him. His movements were calm and steady, almost comforting to watch. Selene found herself studying the small details she hadn't noticed. Before, the way his brow tightened when he read something troubling, the way his hands moved with controlled precision, the way he breathed slower when he sensed she was looking at him. She didn't speak. She didn't want to break the quiet balance growing between them. For the first time since the incident, she felt safe enough to close her eyes. And Corvin worked with an awareness of her presence he didn't know how to ignore. Near midnight, Corvin glanced away from his screen and found Selene curled on the couch, fast asleep. Her breathing was slow and steady, her face calm for the first time since she stepped into his office earlier that day. He rose quietly, walking toward her with soft steps so he wouldn't wake her. He adjusted the blanket that had slipped from her shoulder and made sure it covered her fully. Selene didn't stir. She only sank deeper into rest. Corvin stood there for a moment, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Something in him shifted. He was used to protecting people, but this felt different. Sharper, personal. Instead of leaving the suite, he pulled a chair to the corner of the room where he could see both the door and Selene. He sat there, shoulders straight, senses alert. Every few minutes, he checked the security feed, scanning each floor for movement. Every hour, he made sure nothing near the building changed. And each time he glanced back at Selene, the same quiet truth settled. Deeper inside him, he didn't feel burdened by staying with her. He felt responsible. The night passed slowly, but Corvin didn't rest. He guarded her until morning light touched the edge of the curtains, never letting danger or distance or his own walls come near her. Corvin stepped into his private operations room before sunrise. Screens lit the walls with live updates from his security team. His lead analyst approached him with a tablet in hand. "We found something," he said. Corvin took the device. Multiple reports appeared on the screen. Unmarked vehicles near Selene's street. 2 attempts to locate her through public databases. A third attempt made shortly after she visited the police station. Corvin's jaw tightened. Someone wasn't guessing. Someone was searching with intention. This wasn't random or coincidental. He turned to his team. "Track every number that attempted to access her records," he ordered, "and pull footage from the last 3 nights near her building." Within minutes, more details poured in. The same suspicious car had circled her block more than once. A figure stood near her alley around midnight on 2 separate nights. Someone had interest in her that reached beyond simple fear tactics. Corvin exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. "What else?" he asked. One of the analysts stepped forward. "We flagged activity that suggests an attempt to follow her route home." Corvin didn't speak for a moment. This was the proof he needed. The first sign that Selene's fear wasn't imagined. It was real, and it was closing in. Corvin studied the footage his team gathered. Grainy clips showed a figure lingering near the bus stop Selene used, staying. Far enough away to avoid attention, but close enough to watch who passed. Another clip caught a car creeping along the same path Selene walked each evening, slowing at the points where she usually crossed the street. "Freeze that," Corvin said. The analyst paused the video. The driver wore a cap pulled low, but the pattern was clear. The car followed her route with precision, turning only after she would have turned. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't curiosity. It was tracking. Another report dropped into the feed. "Sir, we found a device near her building," the guard said through the speaker. Placed behind a drain pipe, likely used to monitor comings and goings. Corvin's expression hardened. "Remove it, run prints, and sweep the entire block." He closed his eyes for a brief second, gathering his thoughts. Selene had walked those streets with no idea someone monitored her every move. She carried her bag, bought her groceries, and returned home each night unaware of the eyes following her from a distance. The thought settled in his chest heavier than he liked. She was in danger long before she realized it, and long before he stepped into her life. Another alert appeared on the main screen. "Unauthorized access attempt detected," the tech reported. "Target, her clinic folder." Corvin stepped closer. "Show me the logs." The records revealed that someone tried to open a file linked to Selene's recent client notes. Not once, twice. Both attempts failed, but the timing matched the nights she received the silent calls. Whoever wanted her gone wasn't acting on impulse. They were searching for details. They wanted to know her schedule, her court dates, the people she worked with, and the cases she handled. Corvin tapped the folder. "Lock everything. Encrypt the backups. Block external requests." "Yes, sir." He viewed the timestamps again. The attempts happened late at night, when Selene was probably sitting, alone in her apartment, unaware that someone probed into her work life. The files themselves held nothing harmful, but the attempts proved intent. Someone wanted her tracked, studied, and silenced. Corvin's chest tightened with a feeling he rarely allowed space for, concern that felt personal. He knew now that this wasn't simple intimidation. It was preparation for something worse. He set the tablet down, jaw steady. He needed to talk to her, and soon. Selene closed the bathroom door behind her in the guest suite and leaned against the sink. The soft lighting didn't calm her this time. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter as her breathing sped up, her chest tightening with a mix of fear, shock, and exhaustion. She tried to stay quiet. She didn't want Corvin to hear. She didn't want anyone to see her fall apart. The weight of the past days caught up with her all at once. The silent calls, the car, the ignored report, and now the reality that someone might be tracking her every move. Her throat tightened. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to steady her breathing, but the pressure inside her chest only grew. She slid down to sit on the cool bathroom floor, hugging her knees. The room blurred as tears slipped down her face. She wasn't weak. She wasn't dramatic. She was tired of feeling unsafe, unheard, and uncertain about what waited for her outside those doors. This moment, alone on the floor, trying to stay quiet, was her lowest point since the night she saw the man flee. And she didn't know how much longer she could hold herself together. Corvin approached the guest suite after finishing his call with the team. He intended to inform Selene about the new findings, but when he reached the door, he paused. The room was silent, too silent. He listened for a moment, then heard something faint, the quiet sound of someone trying not to cry. He knocked once, softly. "Selene?" No answer. He waited a few seconds, then opened the door slowly. The main room looked empty. Then he noticed the bathroom light. He stepped closer and stopped at the doorway. Selene sat on the floor, her forehead resting against her knees, shoulders trembling. He didn't step inside. He didn't touch her. He didn't crowd the space. He lowered himself to sit on the floor outside the bathroom instead. Close. Enough for her to hear him, but far enough to respect her privacy. "Selene," he said quietly, "you're safe here." Her breath hitched, but she didn't lift her head. "You're not alone," he added. "Whatever is happening, you don't face it without support." He rested his arm on his knee and kept his voice steady. "No one will reach you here, not while I'm responsible for you." He didn't try to stop her tears. He didn't ask her to explain. He simply stayed where she could feel his presence, offering strength without pressure. It was the first time in years he sat on the floor for someone else, and the first time Selene let herself breathe around him. Selene wiped her cheeks slowly and lifted her head just enough to see Corvin through the half-open bathroom door. He didn't move toward her. He didn't ask her to stand. He didn't speak with authority. Instead, his voice came low and steady. "You're allowed to feel this," he said. Selene blinked at him. He sounded different from the man who gave orders in sharp, clipped lines. Different from the man who commanded a room without raising his voice. "You've held yourself together for days," he continued. "Anyone in your position would feel overwhelmed." The softness in his tone caught her off guard. She never expected a man like Corvin, someone so controlled, distant, and guarded, to speak with that level of calm understanding. Selene rested her back against the cabinet, her breathing lighter. "You don't talk like this to people," she said quietly. He met her eyes. "No," he admitted. "I don't." The honesty in his voice felt real, unpolished. It wasn't meant to comfort, yet it did. Selene felt a small shift inside herself. She wasn't looking at the cold man from the glass tower anymore. She was seeing the version of him he rarely showed anyone. Selene rose slowly from the bathroom floor and stepped into the main room. Corvin stood, giving her space while staying close enough to support her if she needed it. She wiped the last of her tears and drew a long breath. "I tried to get help," she said quietly. "I tried to do the right thing." Corvin listened without interrupting. "They didn't believe me," she continued. "They acted like I was confused or tired, like I made it up." Corvin's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "You were dismissed because they didn't look past the surface," he said. "But I did. And everything you told me matches what my team found." Selene looked up at him. "So I wasn't imagining it?" "No," he said. "Everything points to real danger." Hearing that from him, a man who relied on facts and not sympathy, eased something deep in her chest. For the first time since the incident, she felt heard, seen. She took a slow step toward him. "Thank you," she said softly. "You're the only one who has taken me seriously." Corvin met her eyes with a steady gaze. "You deserve to be taken seriously." In that moment, the trust between them grew stronger than anything she felt from the people she was supposed to depend on. Selene stood a few steps from him, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the air system. Her eyes were still faintly red, but her voice held more strength than before. "You've done so much," she said, "more than anyone else. I don't know how to repay you." Corvin shook his head once, slow and firm. "You do not thank someone for doing what is right." The way he said it made her chest tighten. There was no pride in his tone, no search for praise. It was the simple truth of how he lived. Selene lowered her eyes, touched in a way she hadn't expected. "But you didn't have to help me," she whispered. Corvin stepped closer, keeping his voice steady and calm. "I did," he said, "because leaving you alone with this would be wrong." Selene looked up again, this time with a quiet, steady belief in him. This wasn't about kindness. This wasn't about obligation. This was Corvin choosing to stand beside her because he believed it was the only acceptable choice. A deep breath left her chest, lighter than before. For the first time, fear didn't feel like it owned her. Before we continue, tell us something in the comments. If you were in Selene's position, facing danger that others ignored, and A man like Corvin stepped forward with calm strength and clear action. Would you trust him with your safety? Your thoughts help others reflect on their own choices, and they help this community grow. Like the video, share it with someone who enjoys meaningful stories, and stay with us for the next part. Corvin entered the suite with a tray in hand, setting it on the small table beside the couch. Selene looked up from her seat, surprised. She hadn't expected him to bring anything himself. "You haven't eaten since morning," he said. "You need strength." He didn't phrase it as a question or demand. It was a statement grounded in quiet concern. He reached for the light controls next, adjusting the brightness until the room felt warmer. The harsh overhead lighting softened into something calm and steady. Selene watched him move through the space, noticing again how thoughtful he was without drawing attention to it. He placed a folded sweater on the arm of the couch. "You looked cold earlier," he said. She brushed her fingers over the fabric. "You didn't have to do all this." Corvin paused. "You're under my protection," he said. "That means your basic needs are handled too." His tone stayed practical, but the intention behind the gesture told her more than his words. These weren't duties. These were choices. Small, steady choices that revealed more of him than he intended. Later that afternoon, Corvin stepped into the adjoining office space connected to the suite. The door remained open, allowing Selene to see and hear how he worked when the situation turned serious. He stood behind the desk, issuing instructions with sharp focus. "Secure the perimeter. Update me on any movement near her building. Confirm the identities of everyone who entered the alley that night." His tone was firm but never raised. He spoke with the confidence of someone who expected results and trusted his team to deliver them. Screens around the room displayed maps, names, and incoming messages from guards stationed across different parts of the city. Selene watched from the couch, struck by how different he looked in this environment. Every decision he made was quick and calculated. Every detail mattered to him. He wasn't distant by choice. He was distant because of the weight he carried. She saw that now. Between calls, Corvin glanced toward her briefly, as if checking to make sure she was still there and still safe. Those small looks softened the sharp edges of his work. Selene rested her hands on her lap, unable to ignore the calm strength she felt from him, even from across the room. Later that day, Corvin escorted Selene to a meeting room to gather information about her schedule and recent activities. 2 guards were present, both standing at a respectful distance, but one of them stepped a little too close while handing Selene a document. Corvin reacted before she even processed it. He moved closer, placing himself slightly in front of her, not in an aggressive way, but in a clear, protective stance. The guard immediately stepped back, understanding the silent boundary Corvin enforced around her. Selene felt her breath catch, not out of fear, but out of the awareness that Corvin's instinctive response centered entirely on her safety. When the guard left, Corvin stepped back as well, giving her space again. "Sorry," she whispered, startled by how fast he acted. "You have nothing to apologize for," he said. He kept his voice calm, but there was no mistaking the message in his eyes. "You don't stand alone." Selene looked down, her cheeks warming. This wasn't about control. This wasn't about dominance. It was about instinct, his instinct to protect her before she even recognized a threat. And that small moment carried a weight she felt deep inside. Selene returned to the suite after the meeting, still thinking about how quickly Corvin stepped forward. She sat on the couch, her fingers lightly touching the edge of the blanket beside her. The quiet room gave her too much space to replay that moment. When Corvin entered a few minutes later, she lifted her eyes to him. Something in his expression softened when he saw her sitting there, calmer than before. He approached her without the rigid stance he often carried at work. He placed a folder on the table. "I need you to review a few details," he said. But he didn't leave. He didn't turn away. Instead, he stayed where he was, watching her with a quiet intensity that made her heart beat a little faster. Selene held his gaze, realizing she felt safer with him than she had with anyone in weeks. He cleared his throat, breaking the moment first. "If anything feels off, you tell me," he said. "Even if it seems small." "I will," she said. "I trust you." Corvin inhaled slowly at those words, a slight shift in his posture revealing how deeply they landed. Trust wasn't something he received often, if ever. Yet Selene offered it freely. They held each other's eyes for a moment longer than either intended. A quiet pull existed between them now, subtle yet undeniable. Neither spoke it aloud. Neither needed to. Corvin stepped back from the table, putting a little space between them. He needed the distance. His body reacted before his mind caught up, and he didn't like how natural it felt to stay close to her. For years, distance kept him steady. Distance kept his life in order. Yet now, every time Selene looked at him with tired eyes or quiet trust, something inside him shifted. He didn't want to feel it. He didn't plan for it. But he felt it anyway. He returned to the desk, pretending to review a report. His eyes moved across the page, but he wasn't reading. He was fighting the urge to turn back toward her. He told himself this was temporary. A case. A responsibility. Nothing more. But his chest tightened at the lie he tried to tell himself. Selene sat on the couch, unaware of the war happening inside him. Or maybe she noticed. Her presence filled the room in a way that made it harder for him to retreat behind the walls he lived behind for years. He reminded himself of his rule. No attachments. Yet she had slipped past that rule with quiet steps, not because she tried, but because she needed him. And because he cared more than he wanted to admit. Corvin exhaled slowly, steadying himself. He had to stay focused. He had to stay in control. But staying distant around Selene was becoming harder with every passing hour. Selene rose from the couch and walked toward the small kitchenette to get a glass of water. She expected Corvin to stay absorbed in his work, but when she turned back, she caught him, watching her with a look that didn't match the cold exterior she first saw in his office. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't guarded. It held something quieter. She paused, studying him for a brief moment. He straightened slightly, as if realizing he'd been caught showing more emotion than he intended. "You work harder than anyone I've ever seen," she said lightly, trying to break the tension. Corvin didn't smile, but his expression softened. "People depend on me," he replied. "Yes," she said, "but you're still human." The room fell silent. Corvin blinked once, surprised by the comment. Most people treated him like a machine, built only for protection, made to make decisions, expected to stay unshaken. Selene took a step closer. "You're not as distant as you pretend to be," she said gently. "Not when you care." He didn't deny it. He didn't correct her. He just looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen before, something honest, something unfiltered. For the first time, Selene saw the man beneath the cold rules and controlled voice. And Corvin realized that she saw more of him than anyone else had in years. Night settled over the suite, and the lights dimmed to a gentle glow. Corvin finished reviewing the last of his reports and checked the security feed one more time. Everything remained stable. Selene sat on the couch with her knees pulled close, watching him from a distance. The room felt calmer now, no rush, no pressure, just steady silence between them. She waited until he set his tablet down before speaking. "Do you ever sleep?" she asked softly. Corvin looked up, surprised by the question. "Sometimes," he answered. "That's not a real answer," she said, a small smile touching her lips. He exhaled quietly, leaning back in his chair. "I sleep when I can," he corrected. Selene tilted her head. "Because of your work?" "Because people rely on me," he said. "And I refuse to look away when someone needs protection." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. It must be hard to carry that alone. He didn't respond at first. He looked at her for a long moment, as if debating whether to share more. Finally he said, "It's easier not to think about it." Selene gave him a look filled with quiet understanding. "You don't have to think about it right now," she said. "Sit with me for a moment." The offer wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was human. And Corvin felt the weight of it more deeply than he expected. Corvin hesitated before joining her on the couch. He sat a short distance away, giving her space while still allowing their closeness to feel natural. Selene shifted slightly, turning toward him. The room felt quieter than before. almost warm. She studied his face for a moment before speaking. "You didn't answer my question," she said softly. "Do you sleep at all?" He looked at her with steady eyes. "Not when someone needs me." The words hung between them, heavy and honest. Selene's chest tightened. She had heard many polite reassurances in her life, many empty. Promises meant to comfort her without conviction. But Corvin's statement wasn't a promise. It was a truth he lived by. She reached for the blanket beside her and pulled part of it over his leg without thinking. A small gesture, but it carried something real. Corvin didn't move away. He didn't pretend not to notice. He simply watched her, the edges of his guard slipping lower than ever before. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying, for everything." He held her gaze. "You're safe here," he said. "And you're not facing this alone." A soft breath left her chest. For the first time since the night she witnessed the crime, she felt something other than fear. She felt steady. She felt seen. And Corvin, who built his life around walls and distance, let someone reach him without trying to shut the door. This was their first true connection, quiet, warm, and undeniable. Corvin stood in the operations room reviewing overnight reports when a new alert flashed across the screen. His lead guard rushed in without waiting to be called. "Sir, we have a problem," he said, voice controlled but tense. Corvin turned toward him. "Report. We picked up movement on the restricted floor last night," the guard said. "Someone accessed the service hallway near the top suite. They didn't breach the entrance, but they came close enough to test how tight security is." Corvin's jaw tightened. "Show me the footage." The guard handed him a tablet. The video showed a blurred figure standing at the end of the service corridor, hands pressed against the wall as if searching for a weak point. The person moved with caution, checking angles, staying in blind spots where they thought no one would notice. They weren't wandering, Corvin observed. They came with intent. "Yes," the guard replied, and they knew exactly where to go. The weight of that sentence settled in the room. Someone didn't just want information about Selene. Someone wanted access, direct access. Corvin's voice dropped lower. "They cannot reach her." He set the tablet down and moved toward the door without another word. The moment he left the operations room, the guards followed. He didn't walk. He moved with purpose, every step sharper than the last. Selene had no idea how close danger had come while she slept. But Corvin did, and he would not allow it to happen again. Corvin reached the suite in seconds. His hand hit the access panel, unlocking the door before the guards behind him caught up. He stepped inside fast, scanning the room with sharp precision. Selene stood near the window, holding a cup of tea she hadn't finished. She turned when she heard the door, her expression confused. "Corvin? What's wrong?" He didn't waste a second. "Pack your essentials. Right now." The urgency in his voice cut through the room like a blade. Selene's eyes widened, her breath catching at the tone she had never heard from him before. "Why? What happened?" Corvin moved closer, his jaw set. "They know where you are." Selene froze. The cup slipped slightly in her hand before she steadied it with a trembling breath. "What do you mean they know?" "We have footage," he said. "Someone reached the hallway outside this floor. They didn't break in, but they were close. Too close." Her heartbeat quickened. She felt it in her throat, in her palms, everywhere at once. "Corvin." He stepped toward her, controlled yet determined. "This room is no longer safe. We move now." She nodded slowly, fear rising, but his presence steadied her enough to move. She rushed to the bedroom, grabbing only what she needed. Her hands shook as she reached for her bag, and she dropped a sweater without realizing it. Corvin appeared in the doorway. "Hurry," he said, but his tone softened at the edges when he saw her trembling. She swallowed hard and packed faster. He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, but his presence filled the space with a sense of control she desperately needed. When she zipped the bag, he took one step back, giving her room. "Stay close to me," he said. "Do not fall behind." This wasn't the calm protection from earlier days. This was immediate, direct, A man moving against a threat he refused to let reach her. Selene stepped into the main room with her bag clutched in her hand. Her breaths came shallow, uneven. Every sound felt louder, every shadow sharper. She didn't know what waited outside the suite, and the uncertainty pressed down on her chest. Corvin turned toward her, and the contrast between them was striking. Her eyes held fear she couldn't mask. His gaze stayed steady, controlled, unwavering. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You're safe with me," he said. "I need you to trust that—" She nodded, but her hands still shook around the strap of her bag. "What if they're already near?" she whispered. Corvin shook his head once, firm. "They won't reach you." There was no hesitation in his tone, no doubt in his expression. Selene searched his eyes for something, certainty, reassurance, anything that could anchor her. What she found was a calm so deep it settled her heartbeat. "You're not alone," he said. Those 3 words steadied her more than anything else could. He wasn't asking her to be brave. He wasn't pretending the danger wasn't real. He was telling her he would stand between her and anything that tried to harm her. Selene drew a slow breath, grounding herself in the quiet strength she saw in him. "I'm ready," she whispered. Corvin nodded. "Stay at my side. Don't fall behind." Fear still lingered in her eyes, but she didn't freeze. She moved, because he led with a calm that felt unbreakable. They stepped into the hallway, the guards already positioned at both ends. Selene's steps faltered for a moment, her pulse racing as she took in the shift from warmth to tension, from safety to urgency. Corvin noticed instantly. He reached out and took hold of her wrist. Not tight, not forceful, but firm enough to steady her. "Look at me," he said quietly. Selene lifted her gaze. His eyes held calm strength, the kind that cut through fear and anchored her in the moment. "You're with me," he said. "Stay close." The warmth of his hand grounded her more than the words themselves. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It wasn't a claim. It was reassurance, direct, steady, and exactly what she needed. Her breathing eased. Her shoulders loosened. She found enough strength to keep moving. Corvin kept her wrist in his hand until her steps grew steady. Only then did he release her, but he stayed close enough that she could feel his presence beside her. "Don't look back," he added. She didn't. With Corvin's touch still lingering like a shield around her, Selene stepped forward into the next stage of a night that would change everything. Corvin guided Selene down a secured hallway known only to a few. The guards formed a tight formation around them, but Corvin stayed at her side, matching every step she took. They reached a locked steel door marked with no sign. Corvin tapped his code into the panel, and the door clicked open to a narrow passage lit by soft, controlled lighting. "This way," he said. Selene stepped through, gripping her bag as the door shut behind them. The sound echoed through the passage, making the reality of their escape feel even more urgent. "Where does this lead?" she asked, voice low. "Private exit," Corvin replied. "It connects to the underground drive. No public access, no cameras we don't control." They moved quickly. Selene's breath came faster, but Corvin kept checking her pace, adjusting his steps so she wouldn't fall behind. When they reached the end of the corridor, another guard opened the final door, revealing a sleek black car already running, headlights dimmed. A second vehicle idled behind it. Corvin placed a hand on the small of her back, not pushing, just guiding. "Get in," he said. She slid into the passenger seat. Corvin closed her door, circled the car, and entered the driver's side with a controlled urgency she had never seen from him before. The guards climbed into the trailing car, ready to follow. Corvin pulled out of the underground space with smooth, fast precision. They were no longer hiding. They were moving with intent. And Selene understood one thing clearly. Whoever wanted her silenced had forced Corvin into a mode where he would do whatever it took to keep her alive. The car rolled out of the underground exit and merged onto a quiet service road behind the tower. Corvin kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting close to the gearshift, ready for any sudden move. His posture was steady, controlled, but his eyes carried a sharp focus Selene had never seen so intensely before. The guard vehicle followed close behind, headlights dimmed, creating a protective barrier around them as they moved through the empty streets. Selene watched the city blur past her window. "What if they're following us?" she whispered. "If they try," Corvin said, "they won't get close." His voice held certainty, not confidence born from assumption, but from experience. Every turn he made was intentional. Every street he chose offered fewer ways for anyone to intercept them. His phone buzzed once. He answered through the car system without taking his eyes off the road. "All clear on main routes," one guard reported. "No suspicious vehicles detected." "Stay alert," Corvin replied. He moved his foot slightly, increasing their speed. The car remained smooth, but Selene could tell he was calculating every second, every angle, every possible threat. She looked at him again, studying the hard line of his jaw, the calm set of his shoulders. Even under pressure, he didn't falter. "You're not afraid," she said quietly. Corvin kept his eyes on the road. "I don't have the luxury of being afraid," he answered. "Not when someone depends on me." Her heartbeat eased. She believed him, fully. And for the first time since the nightmare began, the world outside the car felt distant, while the space beside him felt safe. The car moved through a quieter part of the city, the kind of route meant for security teams and late-night transfers. The tension in Selene's shoulders began to ease, but her pulse stayed alert, tuned to every sound outside the windows. She shifted slightly in her seat and noticed something she hadn't before. Corvin's right hand, the one not on the wheel, rested close to the center. Console. Close enough that if she reached out, her fingers would brush his. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't staged. It was simply where his hand landed as he drove with focus and urgency. But the closeness did something to her. It reminded her of how he steadied her wrist, how he guided her through the hallway, how he never once let panic touch his voice, even when danger crept near. She looked at his hand, then at his profile. He didn't look back, but she caught the slight flex in his fingers. The quiet sign of a man who felt the weight of protecting someone. The space between them felt warmer than before, filled with unspoken trust, and rising emotion neither of them asked for, but both of them felt. For a brief moment, Selene considered reaching out, placing her hand over his, grounding herself the way he grounded her earlier. She didn't. Not out of fear, but because she didn't want to break his focus. Still, the closeness stayed with her, settling deep in her chest. This wasn't a rescue driven by duty anymore. This was care, quiet, growing, and impossible to ignore. Corvin turned onto a gated private road lined with tall trees that blocked the view from the main street. The guard vehicle stayed close behind until they reached a steel security gate. It opened automatically, recognizing Corvin's car, and the two vehicles slipped inside. Selene sat upright, clutching her bag. "Where are we?" "My home," Corvin said. "No one outside my team knows this address. You'll be safe here." He parked in front of a modern, quiet house with warm lights glowing from inside. The air outside felt still, almost peaceful compared to the tense ride they'd just escaped. Guards stepped out of the trailing car and scanned the perimeter while Corvin moved to open her door. Selene stepped out, her legs slightly unsteady from adrenaline. Corvin placed a hand at her back again, guiding her toward the entrance. His touch wasn't urgent anymore. It was steady, protective, grounding. Inside, the space felt unexpectedly warm. Soft lighting, clean lines, a calm atmosphere she didn't expect from someone known for cold precision. She turned to him. "You brought me to your home." Corvin met her eyes without looking away. "It's the safest place I control," he said. "I won't risk you anywhere else tonight." Her breath caught, not from fear, from the depth behind his words. This wasn't simple protection anymore. This was a man breaking his own rules, bringing someone into the one place he kept guarded from the world. Selene felt the weight of that choice. The stakes had shifted. The danger outside was real, but the connection between them was becoming just as undeniable. Selene stepped inside the house and paused. She expected a cold space that matched his public image, but the home felt different. The lights were soft, the air quiet, the rooms arranged with simple comfort, nothing loud, nothing sharp. Corvin closed the door behind them. The sound was gentle, not rushed. Selene looked around slowly, taking in the calm she hadn't felt in days. "This is where you live?" she asked, her voice low. "Yes," he said. "It's quiet here." The warmth in the house eased something in her chest. The danger outside felt far away for the first time. The colors were soft. The furniture is clean and simple. She could hear her own breath again. Corvin watched her take it in. He didn't speak, didn't rush her. He let her feel safe at her own pace. For a moment, she forgot the fear that followed her everywhere. For a moment, she felt protected in a place built to keep the world out. Selene lifted her eyes to him, seeing not the CEO or the strategist, but the man who chose to bring her into the one space he never shared with anyone. This house wasn't cold. It reflected the part of him he kept hidden, the part that cared more than he admitted. Corvin walked past her and locked the front door with a quiet click. He checked the second lock, then the security panel beside it. His movements were steady, controlled, but there was something different in the way he carried himself, an awareness that Selene stood only a few steps behind him. Once the system confirmed the house was secure, he turned around. Selene expected him to step away toward another room, but he didn't. He walked toward her instead, slowly, purposefully. His eyes stayed on her, not with suspicion or caution, but with a quiet focus that made her pulse rise. The closer he came, the more she felt the shift in the air around them. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space, but his presence felt stronger than ever. "You're safe now," he said gently. The tone of his voice made her breathe in deeper. The danger was still real, but inside this house, with him watching her like that, she felt something she hadn't felt since the night everything changed. Calm. Corvin didn't touch her. He didn't rush a word, but the way he stood there, as if he was anchoring her back into the moment, made her chest warm. He had locked the house to protect her. Now he stood there, choosing to stay with her instead of retreating into emotional distance. ChatGPT said, Chapter 6, Part 3. She steps close. Selene held her bag against her side for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Corvin's presence filled the room with steady calm, the kind that reached her faster than words ever could. She watched him for a few seconds, her heartbeat slowing and settling into something warm. Then she took a step toward him, a quiet, tentative step. Corvin didn't move. He didn't pull back or turn away. He watched her with stillness, as if every part of him focused on the space between them, narrowing inch by inch. Another step, and another. By the time she reached him, her fear had softened into something else, something steady and certain. She set her bag down on the floor. Her hands trembled, not from panic, but from everything she'd held inside for days. Corvin lowered his gaze to her hands, noticing the tremor. When he looked back up, his eyes held a softness she had only seen in rare flashes. "Selene," he said quietly, but she didn't stop. She closed the final space between them and stood so close his breath touched her forehead. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm not scared right now." Corvin's expression tightened for a second, not from discomfort, but from the pull he'd been holding back since she entered his life. He didn't step away. He didn't rebuild the distance. He let her stand close enough to feel the truth of what was happening between them. Selene slowly lifted her hand, giving him time to step back if he wanted some distance. He didn't move. His breath shifted, but he stayed still, watching her with a quiet intensity that made her heart beat stronger. Her fingers touched the front of his shirt, a soft, steady touch over his chest. The moment her hand rested there, Corvin inhaled sharply. Not loud, not dramatic, but enough to tell her she reached a place he had kept guarded for years. Her palm felt the rise and fall of his breathing, the warmth beneath the fabric, the strength he carried in silence. Corvin lowered his gaze to where her hand rested. He didn't cover it with his own. He didn't move away. He stood anchored, letting her feel the calm heartbeat he tried so hard to control. "Selene," he said again, but his voice cracked slightly, barely, yet enough for her to hear the emotion he usually hid. She looked up at him, her eyes steady. "You saved my life," she said quietly. Corvin's jaw tensed, not out of conflict, but out of the weight of her words. "And I trust you," she added. The honesty in her voice struck him deeper than any threat he had faced. She didn't say it because she felt safe in his home. She said it because she felt safe with him. His shoulders eased in a way she had never seen before. Her hand stayed on his chest. He didn't stop her. He let that connection settle between them with a quiet intensity neither could ignore. Selene's words lingered in the space between them, soft but carrying more weight than anything said that night. Corvin stood still, his breath caught in the moment he never expected to face. Not in the middle of danger. Not in the quiet of his home. Not with someone who slipped past his walls without forcing her way in. "Selene," he said, but the rest of the sentence never formed. She stepped a little closer, her hand still resting gently over his chest. "You didn't have to help me the way you did," she said. "But you did. Every time." He swallowed hard, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "That's my job," he said, though even he heard the unsteady edge in his tone. "No," Selene replied softly, "this is more than your job." Her fingertips pressed lightly against his shirt, not pushing, not asking, only grounding him the way he had grounded her all night. "I trust you," she said again, steady and sincere. Those words broke something open inside him. He spent years building a life where trust wasn't required, where closeness was a distraction, where emotional connection was something he never allowed himself. But hearing her say it, with fear behind her, darkness around them, and honesty in her voice, pulled him into a place he didn't know how to resist. Corvin lowered his head slightly, the smallest sign that her words had reached the part of him he tried to keep locked away. He didn't step back. He didn't rebuild the distance. He let her trust settle into him like a truth he couldn't deny. Corvin drew in a slow breath, trying to steady himself. The closeness between them felt like a tide pushing against the walls he spent years keeping intact. Selene's hand on his chest, her quiet trust, the warmth in her eyes, it all pulled him in ways he wasn't prepared for. He lifted his hand halfway, as if to step back, as if to put distance where his heart refused to create any. "Selene," he said, voice low and strained, "this isn't the right time." She didn't move away. She didn't tighten her hold. She simply stayed there, looking at him with calm honesty, giving him space to choose what he believed was right. Corvin tried again to steady himself. "You've been through enough tonight," he said. "You're tired. You're shaken. I shouldn't—" He stopped, unable to finish. His breath faltered, betraying him. Selene searched his face gently. "I'm not asking for anything," she said softly. "I'm standing here because I feel safe." Her words hit him harder than any threat outside those walls. Safety. With him, Corvin dropped his gaze for a moment, trying to pull himself back into control. He clenched his jaw, fighting the rising pull he tried to dismiss, as instinct, as concern, as anything other than what it truly was. He took the smallest step back, a half step, but his body stopped before the distance could grow. Every part of him wanted to resist. Every rule he set for himself demanded he resist. But Selene's presence, her steadiness, her trust, it all broke through the last layer of restraint he held onto. He lifted his eyes to hers one more time, and the struggle inside him was clear, the part of him that wanted distance versus the part of him that reached for her the moment she walked into his life. He exhaled shakily. His resistance was failing, and he felt it. Corvin stood frozen in front of her, breath tight, restraint thinning with each second she refused to step back. Selene watched him with quiet patience, her hand still resting gently on his chest, grounding him in a way he didn't know he needed. He tried, one last time, to pull himself away, to place distance between them, to rebuild the walls that kept him steady for years. But he couldn't, not anymore. Something unspoken passed between them. Something warm, something steady, something he could no longer ignore. He lifted his hand and placed it lightly at her waist, hesitant at first, as if giving himself one final chance to walk away. He didn't take it. Selene looked up at him, unafraid. "Corvin," she whispered. That was the moment he lost the battle with himself. His resolve broke. His restraint slipped away. Corvin leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she needed distance. She didn't. She rose slightly onto her toes, meeting him halfway. Their lips touched, not rushed, not wild, but slow and warm, the kind of kiss that carried truth more than intention. His hand steadied at her waist. Her fingers curled lightly against his shirt. The kiss deepened only enough to speak one message. They both wanted this. Not because of fear, not because of the night they fled danger, but because the connection between them had grown too real to silence. When Corvin finally pulled back, he kept his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling softly in the quiet room. His eyes closed for a moment, steadying himself in the closeness he once swore he would avoid. Selene didn't move. She didn't speak. She let the silence hold them together in a way words never could. The room felt different after their kiss. Not brighter, not louder, just fuller, as if something that had been waiting between them had finally found its place. Corvin kept his forehead against hers for a moment longer, breathing in, slowly as if grounding himself in the truth of what had just happened. When he finally stepped back, it was slight, careful, as if he wanted space but didn't want to lose the closeness they shared. "I should have waited," he said, voice quiet and unsteady. Selene looked at him, her expression soft and sure. "I wanted it," she replied. Her words settled deep inside him, calming the doubt he feared would return. She wasn't confused. She wasn't reacting out of fear or shock. She made a choice, just as he did. Corvin lifted a hand and gently brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, then lowered his arm again, stepping back a little to give her space. He didn't leave the room. He stayed close enough for her to know she wasn't alone, but far enough to respect the emotion of the moment. "You should rest," he said, voice softer than she'd ever heard. "I will," she whispered. Corvin walked her to the guest room, opened the door for her, and paused only long enough to meet her eyes again. "You're safe here," he said. She nodded, feeling the truth of those words in her chest. He waited until she stepped inside, then gently closed the door, remaining outside for a long moment. Guarding the space, guarding her, guarding the shift in his heart, he could no longer deny. "Before we go on, tell me in the comments, would you have allowed the kiss to happen or stepped back? Your voice shapes this story's journey and supports this channel." Morning arrived with a calm Selene hadn't felt in a long time, but Corvin didn't rest. He was already in his private office, screens glowing across the wall. Files spread across the desk, his team on standby for updates. He stood with one hand braced on the table, the other holding a report his lead analyst sent minutes earlier. His eyes moved quickly, absorbing every detail. The pieces were finally lining up. "Pull all financial transfers linked to the suspect," Corvin ordered. "Already tracing them," the analyst replied over the speaker. Another alert popped up. Encrypted messages, unusual payments, late-night transfers from a private account tied to someone with influence. Corvin's jaw tightened. "Cross-reference these times with Selene's report logs," he said. Within seconds, the match appeared. Every suspicious movement around Selene aligned perfectly with the nights she handled a case near the clinic. Every moment of danger is connected to one pattern, one man. Corvin leaned closer to the monitor, his expression sharpening. "We're close," he muttered. He collected the printouts, arranged them into a timeline, and added them to his evidence board. When he stepped back, he saw the truth clearly. This wasn't random. This wasn't panic. This was planned by someone who feared what Selene saw. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself. He finally had the missing pieces. Now he needed to tell her. Corvin spread the last set of documents across the desk, his eyes narrowing on one name that appeared again and again. A series of wire transfers, payments to unlisted contractors, a private account used to mask movement. The same name sat at the center of everything, a man with power. A man with influence. A man who believed his money could erase consequences. Corvin picked up the file and walked toward the wall of screens, enlarging the image of the suspect. The businessman's face appeared calm, polished, and well-dressed. A public figure who pretended to care about charity work and community development, but the evidence revealed the truth. He funded the attack. He paid the man who fled the crime scene. He issued the orders to track Selene. Corvin clenched the folder in his hand, his jaw tight with controlled anger. He thought he could hide this, Corvin said under his breath. His second-in-command stepped closer. Everything points to him, the guard confirmed. He's the one who wanted the witness silenced. Corvin didn't respond right away. He stared at the evidence board with a look that held more than strategy. It held a personal weight now. This wasn't only about stopping a criminal. This was about protecting the one person who walked into his life without asking for anything except the truth. Corvin closed the folder. "We're taking him down," he said, voice calm and absolute. Corvin placed the folder in the center of the table and opened the next set of documents. Bank statements, coded transfers, offshore entries, and hidden transactions. Each line exposed something the businessman never intended anyone to see. "Run the numbers again," Corvin said. His analyst responded, "Already verified. Every transfer connects to the same account. He paid to cover up the scheme." Corvin studied the pages. The pattern was clear. The businessman had been moving money through false contracts and forged invoices. When someone inside the company threatened to reveal the truth, he ordered a confrontation that turned violent. The man Selene saw fleeing the scene wasn't acting alone. He was following orders backed by money, and a desperate attempt to bury the truth. Corvin clicked through a set of surveillance clips showing late-night meetings, cash drops, and a private driver picking up the same envelope each week. Everything pointed to one conclusion. The businessman feared exposure more than anything, and Selene, unknowingly, saw the moment his plan fell apart. Corvin pulled up the final piece of evidence, a message from the businessman to his hired contractor. Short, direct, threatening. "Handle it before she talks." Corvin exhaled slowly, his face tightening with resolve. There was no misunderstanding now, no misinterpretation. Selene was targeted because she had seen something true, something powerful, enough to bring a wealthy man to his knees if it ever reached a courtroom. He closed the file. "It's over for him," Corvin said quietly. But he knew the hardest part of the truth still had to reach her. Selene sat on the edge of the couch, her hands resting lightly on her knees as Corvin entered the room. He carried a file in his hand, but what caught her attention was the seriousness in his eyes. He wasn't hiding it. He wasn't softening it. He was preparing her. "Corvin?" she asked quietly. He set the file on the table and lowered himself to sit across from her. "There's something I need you to understand," he said. Selene straightened. "Is it about the man I saw that night?" "Yes," he replied. "But it's bigger than that." He opened the file and turned it toward her. Names, dates, transfers, photos, all placed neatly on each page. "You weren't followed because you made a report," he said. "You were followed because you saw the truth." Selene frowned, confusion shifting into dawning realization. "Truth? The crime you witnessed wasn't random," Corvin continued. "It was tied to a financial scheme run by a wealthy businessman. He sent someone to confront an employee who threatened to expose him. That confrontation turned violent. Selene felt her pulse pick up. "And I saw the man running afterward." "Yes," Corvin said. "You saw him leaving the scene. And that made you a threat." Her breath caught. "So, he wants me silenced." Corvin's jaw tightened. "He believes removing you will protect him." Silence filled the room for a moment. Selene lowered her eyes, her fingers slightly trembling. She had imagined danger. She had feared danger. But hearing the truth laid out so clearly, it made everything real in a way that shook her. She swallowed hard. "All because I saw something." Corvin leaned forward, his voice steady. "Because you saw the truth he wanted hidden." Selene closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of it. She wasn't caught in random chaos. She was caught in the crossfire of someone else's lies because she told the truth. Selene set the folder aside and wrapped her arms around herself. The room felt steady, but her thoughts moved far too fast. Everything she'd tried to dismiss, everything she'd brushed off as her imagination, suddenly carried sharp clarity. Her voice came soft, barely a whisper. He wanted me gone, over something I didn't even understand. Corvin stood a short distance away, giving her space while staying close enough to support her. He saw the shift in her breathing, the way her shoulders tightened, the slight tremor in her hands. Fear settled over her. Not the loud kind, but the deep, quiet kind that sits behind the ribs and doesn't let go. "I don't know how to face someone like him," she said. "He has money, power, people who listen to him." Corvin crossed his arms, his tone steady. "They don't matter to me," he said. "And they don't decide your fate." "But they tried," she whispered. Her eyes lifted to meet his. "What if he tries again? What if this isn't over?" Corvin held her gaze without looking away. "As long as I'm here, he won't touch you." The promise wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it carried a strength that steadied her heartbeat. Still, the fear lingered, not because she doubted Corvin, but because she understood the reality. She was caught in something far bigger than she ever expected. Selene lowered her gaze again, gripping the edge of the blanket. Her world had shifted, and for a moment she didn't know where to place her feet. Selene remained quiet for a long moment, her breath slow but uneven. Fear still held her shoulders tight, but beneath it, something else began to rise. A small, steady flame that pushed through her uncertainty. She straightened her back slightly. "I don't want to live like this," she said softly. Corvin stepped closer, noticing the shift in her tone. "You won't," he replied. Selene shook her head. "I mean, hiding, running, waiting for something to happen." Her fingers tightened around the blanket, then released it. "I didn't ask for any of this, but I won't let someone like him control how I breathe." Corvin studied her face, seeing not just fear now, but resolve. Quiet, rising, and real. "I'm tired of being scared," she continued. "I want my life back. I want to wake up and not check every corner. I want to go to work without wondering who is watching." Her voice grew stronger with each word. She wasn't trembling now. She wasn't shrinking into the moment. Corvin saw it, the courage forming inside her, not because the danger was gone, but because she wasn't willing to let fear define her anymore. "You're stronger than you think," he said. Selene took a small breath, steadying herself. "Maybe," she answered. "But strength doesn't mean much until you use it." Her eyes lifted to his again, and for the first time, he saw a spark in them that matched his own determination. Something had changed. The fear hadn't disappeared, but courage had finally stepped beside it. Selene sat up straighter, the blanket falling from her shoulders as she gathered the courage that had been building inside her. She looked at the folder again, then at Corvin, and the decision landed in her chest with clarity she didn't expect. "I'm going to testify," she said. Corvin paused. The air between them felt still, as if the room recognized the weight of her words. Selene continued, steady now. "He did all this because he was scared of being exposed. I won't let him silence me, not after everything he put me through." Corvin stepped closer, expression calm but firm. "Testifying brings you into the open. It puts you in the same room as him. The risk increases." "I know," she said, "and I'm still going to speak." He studied her eyes, searching for doubt. There was fear, yes, she didn't hide it. But there was also strength, the kind he hadn't seen when she first walked into his office. "This started because I saw the truth," Selene said. "If I stay quiet now, he wins." Corvin lowered his gaze for a moment, then looked back up. "This isn't a simple choice." "No," she replied, "but it's the right one." For the first time, the direction of her path wasn't shaped by fear or pressure. It was shaped by her own decision, her own voice, her own resolve. Selene wasn't just surviving anymore. She was standing. Corvin stepped even closer, the tension in his shoulders clear now. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frustrated. He was worried in a way he didn't know how to hide. "Selene," he said quietly. "You don't understand how dangerous a courtroom can be when someone with his resources feels cornered." She held her ground. "I understand enough." He shook his head. "No, you've seen only the surface. Testifying puts you in front of him, his attorneys, and his influence. He'll try to break you with words the way he couldn't with fear." Selene swallowed but didn't step back. "I won't let him scare me into silence." Corvin took a slow breath. "This isn't about fear. This is about survival. My job is to keep you alive, and stepping into a courtroom gives him a direct target." His voice softened. "I can protect you here. I can guard you outside. But in that room, with cameras, with reporters, with all eyes watching, there are limits I can't control." She looked at him steadily. "You've kept me safe from everything so far." "Yes," he replied, "because you trusted me. I need you to trust me now. Don't put yourself in the line of fire." Selene shook her head. "If I stay quiet, he wins. If I speak, there's a chance someone will finally hold him accountable." Corvin stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. "I don't want to watch you walk into danger that I cannot shield you from." She felt the weight behind those words, the care, the fear, the quiet truth he didn't say aloud. And yet, her resolve didn't fade. Not anymore. Selene stepped closer, close enough that Corvin's breath slowed, close enough that he couldn't retreat into logic or caution. Her eyes held fear, yes, but they also held something stronger. Determination shaped by everything she'd endured. "You've protected me from the moment I walked into your office," she said quietly. "You believed me when no one else did. You stood between me and danger more times than I can count." Corvin didn't speak. He couldn't. He felt the truth of her words more deeply than he expected. Selene's voice softened, but it didn't lose its strength. "You gave me strength, Corvin. Not by forcing it into me, but by showing me what it looks like to stand for what's right." He looked away for a brief second, wrestling with the part of him that wanted to shield her from everything, even her own courage. She reached out and touched his forearm gently, grounding him the way he had grounded her the night they escaped. "Let me use the strength you helped me find," she said. He lifted his gaze again, and this time he saw her fully, not as someone who needed saving, but as someone ready to face the truth head on. Her next words were soft but fierce. "I won't run anymore. I won't hide. I want to speak." Silence filled the room for a long moment. Not tense, powerful. Corvin exhaled, slow and steady. He didn't agree with her choice. He still feared what the courtroom could bring, but he saw her courage now, rooted in something beyond fear, strengthened by the support he had given her without realizing it. He nodded once. "I'll be there," he said quietly. "Right behind you." Selene's breath eased, and her shoulders lowered. Not because danger was gone, but because she knew she didn't stand alone. Courage grows when someone stands with you, not to lead you, not to push you, but to remind you that your voice matters. The courtroom buzzed with low whispers when Selene entered, flanked by 2 guards. Every seat was filled. Lawyers shuffled papers, reporters adjusted their cameras, and the judge's bench stood tall at the front, quiet but imposing. The moment Selene stepped forward, the atmosphere shifted. People glanced at her with curiosity, some with doubt, others with sympathy. She felt every stare land on her like a weight across her shoulders. She drew a slow breath. Her palms were damp. Her heartbeat pressed against her ribs. Corvin followed a step behind, silent and steady. He didn't touch her, but his presence formed a wall around her, strong enough to breathe through the tension. As they approached the witness stand, Selene felt the air thicken. This wasn't like the sanctuary of Corvin's home or the quiet halls of his office. This was public, open, exposed. The guards positioned themselves at the back and along the side aisles. Every movement in the room felt amplified, every sound sharp. Selene swallowed hard, holding her bag close. She had been afraid before, but nothing compared to the weight of walking into a room full of strangers with the truth waiting inside her chest. Corvin leaned closer as they reached the front. "Look straight ahead," he murmured. "Don't watch the crowd." His voice steadied her. She lifted her chin. She stepped forward. The courtroom fell into a hush. The battle was about to begin. Selene took her seat at the witness stand, the microphone positioned inches from her. She could feel the courtroom watching her settle in, but one presence burned louder than the rest. Across the room, at the defendant's table, the suspect sat with his attorneys, the wealthy businessman whose actions shattered her peace, the reason she couldn't walk home without fear, the man who tried to erase her. He turned his head slowly and locked eyes with her. The stare he gave her wasn't loud or dramatic. It was cold, sharp, calculated, the kind of stare meant to remind her of the danger she faced. A silent threat, dressed in confidence. Selene felt her breath hitch, her fingers tightening around the edge of the stand. For a moment, everything she had learned, everything she had prepared for, slipped beneath the weight of his gaze. But then Corvin's presence pressed gently behind her, steady, unmoving. She didn't turn to look at him, but she felt him there, a shield she didn't have to ask for. The suspect's stare tried to shake her confidence. Corvin's quiet strength steadied it. Selene lifted her chin and looked away from the man who wanted her to be silent. For the first time, his stare didn't make her shrink. It reminded her why she was here. The prosecutor approached the podium, adjusting a stack of papers. "Miss Ward, are you ready?" Selene nodded, though her hand trembled slightly as she placed it near the microphone. Her throat tightened, and her voice felt trapped somewhere between fear and determination. The judge looked toward her. "You may begin." The courtroom fell silent. Her heart began to race. Her fingers trembled again, gripping the wooden edge of the stand. She inhaled shakily. For a moment, she wasn't ready. She wasn't steady. But then, she reminded herself of why she was here. The night she reported the crime. The car was parked outside her home. The silent calls. The man who ran past her was desperate and stained with guilt. And Corvin, standing behind her now, calm, present, watching over her with the same steady gaze that protected her through every step of this nightmare. Selene took another breath, deeper this time. Her shoulders eased, her hands steadied. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. "I saw him. I saw everything." The tremble faded. The strength remained. In that moment, she wasn't the frightened woman on the bathroom floor or the shaken witness seeking shelter in a tower. She was someone who refused to be pushed aside again. She stood firm because she had truth, and now she had courage. Corvin stood a few feet behind the witness stand, arms crossed, feet planted, his attention fixed on every detail unfolding. He didn't blink often, didn't shift, didn't allow a single distraction to pull him away from Selene. He wasn't just watching the suspect. He was watching the lawyers, the guards, the crowd, anyone who moved. His gaze followed every shift in the room with precision. Any sign of danger, any attempt to intimidate her, any sudden action, he would see it before it happened. When Selene's voice wavered at the beginning of her testimony, Corvin's posture tightened slightly, as if willing his steadiness into her. When she looked stronger, he eased. When the suspect leaned back and whispered to his attorney with a smug expression, Corvin's eyes narrowed just enough to signal that he noticed. Selene didn't turn around, but she felt him there. The same protective presence that carried her through the night, that led her through darkness, that stood between her and harm more times than she could count. She spoke with more confidence, knowing Corvin was behind her, ready to challenge anyone who tried to shake her truth. He wasn't in the courtroom to observe. He was there to guard her, the same way he had since the day their worlds collided. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Miss Ward, please tell the court what you witnessed on the night in question." Selene took a steady breath. "I was leaving work. It was late. I was locking the clinic door when I heard footsteps, fast, uneven." She paused, gathering her thoughts. The courtroom leaned in. "A man ran past me. His shirt had stains across the front. He looked frightened, like someone was chasing him. He held a phone with a cracked screen. When he reached the corner, he looked back. That's when I saw his face clearly." The prosecutor nodded. "And is that man present in this courtroom?" Selene lifted her eyes and pointed directly at the suspect. Yes, he's right there. A wave of murmurs spread through the room. The suspect's jaw tightened. His attorney leaned in, whispering urgently, but Selene didn't look away. The prosecutor continued. What happened next? He disappeared around the corner. I called the police. I filed a report. But it wasn't taken seriously. A quiet tremor touched her voice. Not weakness, but truth. Honest, direct truth. Selene continued, steadier now. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what happened before he ran past me. I only knew something was wrong. When strange things started happening around my building, I went back to the police. Again, I wasn't heard. The jury watched her closely now. The judge leaned forward slightly. The suspect's attorney shifted in his seat. Selene held her breath for a moment, then added, I'm here today because someone believed me when others didn't. And because what I saw matters. Her honesty cut through the room's noise and tension. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rehearsed. It was a simple truth, and it shifted the energy of the entire case. The moment Selene finished her statement, the prosecutor nodded with clear confidence. The defense attorney wasted no time rising from his seat, adjusting his suit jacket as he walked toward the podium with a practiced air of control. Miss Ward, he began, voice smooth, you claim you saw my client clearly. At night, during a moment of stress. Are you sure you didn't misinterpret what you saw? Selene steadied her breath. I'm sure. The attorney raised a brow. People often think they see things that aren't there. Shadows, faces, quick movements. It's easy to mistake one man for another. Corvin's posture tightened behind her. Selene didn't look away. I know what I saw. The defense attorney paced slowly. You never met him before that night. You don't know him. You had no reason to memorize his face. I didn't memorize it, she said. I recognized it when I saw him again today. The fear he had that night. The look he gave before turning the corner. That isn't something you forget. The lawyer stopped. The crowd murmured. The prosecutor rose immediately. Objection. The witness is being pressured into speculation. Overruled, the judge said, though his eyes shifted toward the defense with a warning. The defense attorney tried a different angle. You mentioned feeling unsafe. Fear can distort memory. It can magnify details that weren't present. Isn't it possible your fear came first, and the story formed around it? Selene shook her head. No. My fear came after. It came when I realized someone didn't want me alive. A sharp silence followed. The prosecutor stepped forward again, voice firm. Let the record show the witness has been targeted multiple times since filing her initial report. That alone supports her clarity and consistency. The defense attorney exhaled sharply, sensing control slipping. The judge tapped his pen once. Move on. Selene held the lawyer's stare without blinking. She wasn't breaking. She wasn't bending. The courtroom saw it. So did Corvin. Her courage spoke louder than any argument the defense could build. The defense attorney stepped back to the table, whispering heatedly to the suspect. The businessman's expression shifted. First irritation, then something sharper. He leaned forward, eyes locked on Selene, with a glare that carried meaning no words could match. A silent threat. A warning. A reminder of who he believed himself to be. Selene's breath caught. Even from across the room, the message was clear. But before that fear could settle into her chest, the guards stationed along the aisle reacted. Two of them stepped forward, adjusting their stance so they stood between Selene and the defendant, blocking his view. Another moved closer to Corvin, waiting for his signal. Corvin didn't move from his position behind her, but the shift in his body was unmistakable. His shoulders tightened, jaw set, eyes locked on the suspect with a glare colder than the courtroom air. He didn't need to speak. He didn't need to step forward. Every guard in the room understood his message. If the suspect tried anything, even a whisper, a gesture, a move, Corvin would act. The judge noticed the tension and cleared his throat. Everyone will remain composed, he warned firmly. This is a courtroom, not a battleground. But it was too late. The tone had changed. The suspect knew he was losing control. Selene knew she was no longer an easy target. And Corvin, he watched every breath the man took, ready to intercept danger before it reached her. Selene exhaled slowly, steadying herself as the guards maintained their protective formation. The truth had shaken the room. And now everyone understood. She wasn't standing here alone. The judge called for a brief recess. The courtroom doors opened, and people began to move. Attorneys gathering their papers, reporters, whispering about Selene's testimony, guards tightening their positions near the suspect. Selene remained seated at the witness stand, shoulders tense, hands still trembling from the heated exchange. The weight of the suspect's glare lingered in her mind, sharp and unsettling. Corvin stepped closer, stopping beside her, not touching, not drawing attention, but close enough for her to feel his presence steady her again. "You did well," he said quietly. Selene exhaled shakily. "He looked at me like—" She couldn't finish. "I know," Corvin said. His voice held a calm that cut through her fear. "But he can't reach you here." She nodded, though her breath was still uneven. Corvin lowered his voice even more. "You spoke clearly. You stayed honest. That matters. You didn't let him shake you." "I was scared," she admitted. "That doesn't make you weak." His tone softened. "It makes you human." Selene looked down at her hands. "I thought I'd fall apart." "But you didn't," Corvin said. "You held yourself together in front of him, his lawyers, and everyone watching." That took strength. She lifted her eyes at last. His gaze was steady, unwavering, focused entirely on her. And in that moment, her racing thoughts began to slow. Corvin added quietly, "You don't have to face the rest of this alone. I'm here." Every step, her shoulders loosened. Her breath steadied. The storm in her chest eased just enough for her to sit taller. She didn't need grand promises. She needed exactly what he offered. Quiet strength that never left her side. ChatGPT said, Chapter 8, Part 8. Corvin calmed her afterward. The judge called for a brief recess. The courtroom doors opened and people began to move. Attorneys gathering their papers, reporters, whispering about Selene's testimony, guards tightening their positions near the suspect. Selene remained seated at the witness stand, shoulders tense, hands still trembling from the heated exchange. The weight of the suspect's glare lingered in her mind, sharp and unsettling. Corvin stepped closer, stopping beside her, not touching, not drawing attention, but close enough for her to feel his presence steady her again. "You did well," he said quietly. Selene exhaled shakily. "He looked at me like—" She couldn't finish. "I know," Corvin said. His voice held a calm that cut through her fear. "But he can't reach you here." She nodded, though her breath was still uneven. Corvin lowered his voice even more. "You spoke clearly. You stayed honest. That matters. You didn't let him shake you." "I was scared," she admitted. "That doesn't make you weak." His tone softened. "It makes you human." Selene looked down at her hands. "I thought I'd fall apart." "But you didn't," Corvin said. "You held yourself together in front of him, his lawyers, and everyone watching." That took strength. She lifted her eyes at last. His gaze was steady, unwavering, focused entirely on her. And in that moment, her racing thoughts began to slow. Corvin added quietly, "You don't have to face the rest of this alone. I'm here." Every step, her shoulders loosened. Her breath steadied. The storm in her chest eased just enough for her to sit taller. She didn't need grand promises. She needed exactly what he offered. Quiet strength that never left her side. Pookie is waiting for your approval to proceed to Part 9. Chapter 8, Part 9. Reporters outside. She reaches for his hand without looking. When the session ended for the day, the judge dismissed everyone with a firm reminder to return the next morning. Selene stepped down from the witness stand, her legs still tense from holding so much pressure inside. Corvin walked beside her, matching her pace without rushing her. Guards led the way toward the side exit, but the moment the doors opened, the low murmur of the courtroom transformed into a loud wave of noise. Reporters, cameras, flashes, Questions shouted into the air with no regard for Selene's fear. "Miss Ward, do you believe the suspect targeted you? Are you scared to testify again tomorrow? Did you recognize him immediately? Is someone protecting you?" Microphones pushed forward. Cameras pointed so close she could see her reflection in the lenses. Selene froze for half a second at the intensity of it all. Corvin moved instantly, stepping closer, creating a barrier with his body. The guards tightened their formation, guiding her through the crowd with controlled steps. But the noise kept rising, the questions overlapping until they felt like walls closing in on her. Her breath shortened. Her hands trembled again. Without looking, without thinking, Selene reached beside her. Her fingers brushed against Corvin's. He didn't hesitate. He took her hand gently, threading his fingers through hers with a calm certainty that steadied her pulse. The contact wasn't bold. It wasn't meant for the cameras. It was quiet, grounding, real. Corvin gave her hand a light squeeze. "Eyes forward," he murmured. "You're doing fine." Selene lifted her chin, letting his voice anchor her above the noise. Reporters shouted louder, trying to capture the moment, but she didn't hear them anymore. She heard only her heartbeat and the soft strength in Corvin's grip, a silent promise that she wasn't walking through this alone. With her hand in his, they moved through the crowd, not as a frightened witness and a private protector, but as two people facing the storm together. The news broke early in the morning. Corvin's team reviewed the update first, then forwarded the official statement to him while he stood in his office overlooking the city. "Formal charges filed," his lead advisor said. "Multiple counts, financial fraud, obstruction, and ordering harm to silence a witness." Corvin read every word without blinking. This was the step they had fought for, the turn in the case that proved Selene's testimony held weight. The suspect could no longer hide behind money or influence. His name, once untouchable, now sat on the front page of every major outlet with accusations stamped across it. Down the street, reporters gathered outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed. Commentators debated outcomes. But inside the tower, everything felt quieter. Selene sat at the edge of the conference table, her hands folded neatly. In her lap, as one of Corvin's staff members explained the legal process. She listened with calm interest, nodding at each point. When she lifted her eyes to Corvin, he spoke with steady clarity. "This doesn't end everything, but it changes the direction. He faces real consequences now." Selene exhaled softly. "So this means he can't reach me the same way anymore." "He won't," Corvin said. His tone left no room for doubt. "His options are limited, his influence is shrinking, and every charge filed strengthens your safety." She looked down for a moment, then back at him. "Thank you for not giving up on this." He didn't answer right away. He wasn't someone who enjoyed praise, but he also understood these words weren't casual. They came from someone who had lived in fear for weeks and could finally breathe again. "You deserved the truth," he said. "You deserved protection the moment you stepped forward. The charges are only part of that." Her lips curved into a small smile, one that stayed with him longer than he expected. For the first time, Corvin allowed himself a silent thought. This wasn't only justice. This was the beginning of her freedom, and he had helped give it to her. Even with charges filed, Corvin didn't relax. If anything, his vigilance sharpened. While Selene reviewed documents with his team, he stepped into the command room. A secure space lined with screens showing maps, call logs, and surveillance updates. His staff straightened when he entered. "Status?" he asked. "Movement around her building has stopped," one guard reported. "No unusual activity in the last 12 hours. Another added, "The suspect's associates are under investigation. Some went quiet, some fled. We're tracking them." Corvin studied the board, his eyes moving over every detail. Even with evidence stacked against the suspect, loose ends still bothered him. People with desperate motives made reckless choices, and he would not allow any risk near Selene. Not now, not when she finally had space to breathe again. He lowered his voice. "Keep surveillance active. I want alerts on her block, her clinic, every route she uses. Yes, sir. Corvin lingered at the edge of the room, staring at a satellite feed of the courthouse. He clenched his jaw slightly. Most men would see the charges and assume the danger was over. Corvin knew better. Threats didn't vanish because a judge stamped a paper. They waited. They regrouped. He returned to her floor, walking down the quiet hallway. Every guard nodded as he passed. Every door locked automatically behind him. It wasn't about paranoia. It was about precision. Until the suspect's influence collapsed completely, Selene stayed under his full protection. When Corvin reached the suite, Selene glanced up from her seat. "You're checking things," she said, reading him without effort. "Always," he replied. She gave a soft smile, one that held reassurance instead of worry. "You don't have to watch every corner anymore." "Yes," he said, "I do." She didn't argue. She understood something important. Corvin wasn't guarding her out of duty anymore. He was guarding her because losing her was not something he intended to risk. A week after the charges were announced, Selene stepped through the doors of the legal clinic again. The same hallway, the same rows of case folders, the same desks pushed against the walls. But everything felt different. Her co-workers greeted her with relief. Some hugged her. Some whispered how brave she had been on the stand. Even clients who barely knew her thanked her for speaking up. Selene didn't shrink under the attention like she once might have. Her steps were steadier now. Her voice didn't waver when she spoke. Her shoulders no longer curled inward to make herself smaller. She picked up her work as if reclaiming part of herself. She answered calls. She met with clients. She listened to their fears and offered guidance, the same way she always had, except now her confidence carried weight. Outside the clinic window, life moved normally. Cars passed. People walked. No silent vehicles lingered near the curb. No shadows followed her route home. When she left for lunch, she paused at the crosswalk. For months, she had checked every corner twice, head turning sharply at small sounds. Today, she breathed in the open air without flinching. She still felt cautious, of course. Trauma didn't vanish in a day. But her fear no longer controlled her. Courage wasn't loud. It grew slowly the way she did now. At the end of the day, she returned to the tower for a security review. Corvin waited near the elevator, arms folded, posture steady. "You went back to work," he said. "Yes," she replied. "It felt time. How did it go?" She gave a small smile. "I didn't hide in my office." "That's progress, right?" He studied her closely, not to evaluate, but to understand. "It's more than progress," he said. "It's you reclaiming your life." Selene lowered her eyes for a moment, touched by his words. The woman who once stood trembling in his office was now walking forward with strength she didn't know she had. And Corvin saw every inch of that growth. Corvin watched Selene step out of the elevator that evening, her stride steady, her eyes bright from a day she reclaimed piece by piece. She moved with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before, and the sight of it twisted something inside him, not with worry, but with a feeling he didn't fully know how to name. She was safe enough to return to her world, safe enough to walk to work again, safe enough to start living beyond these guarded walls. And that meant she wouldn't need him the same way. The thought settled heavy in his chest. He followed her into the suite for their routine briefing. She spoke about her clients, her co-workers, how relieved everyone seemed. Her voice carried warmth. Life had opened for her again. Corvin listened, but his mind drifted. Every victory she gained pushed her farther from the danger that brought her into his life, farther from the tower, farther from his reach. She looked at him and noticed something unusual in his expression. "Corvin?" Her tone softened. "You're quiet." He cleared his throat. "You're moving forward. That's good." She tilted her head slightly. "It sounds like something's bothering you." He didn't answer right away. He wasn't used to explaining his thoughts, especially ones that unsettled him. But Selene held his gaze with patience. Finally he said, "You're stronger now. You don't need constant protection." He paused. "And that means you won't need to stay here much longer." Selene looked down at her hands, then back at him. "Is that what you want?" she asked softly. Corvin opened his mouth, then closed it. He had guided countless clients through crises. He had guarded high-profile figures without forming the slightest emotional tie. This should have been simple, but Selene wasn't simple. He looked away for a second. "I want you safe," he said. "Whatever that requires." It wasn't the full truth, but it was the piece he could manage. She stepped a little closer, not enough to cross a line, but enough to make his breath shift. "You've done more than keep me safe," she said. "You helped me stand again." Her words pressed into him heavier than any threat he'd faced. Corvin realized that letting her return to her routine wasn't the real challenge. The challenge was accepting that he didn't want distance, not from her. Selene stayed for the evening review, but neither of them rushed through it. The tower felt quieter tonight, the usual rush of staff and security muted as the city lights glowed through the glass walls. She sat across from Corvin at the conference table, flipping through updated case notes while he typed an email. The silence wasn't sharp or formal. It was gentle, steady, comforting in a way neither of them mentioned. A soft moment unfolded when Selene reached for a file and brushed her sleeve against his hand by accident. She pulled back quickly. "Sorry," she said with a shy laugh. Corvin shook his head. "You're fine." Their eyes met for a second longer than necessary. Later, she stood by the window, watching the city below. The glow reflected on her face, and Corvin found himself watching her instead of the documents in front of him. "You always choose the brightest view," he said. She smiled. "It reminds me there's more than fear, more than work. Life keeps going out there." He stepped closer, not enough for her to feel cornered, but enough for her to know she wasn't alone in the moment. "You're part of that now." She looked at him again, her expression soft. "Because of you." He didn't respond, but something in his chest tightened at the words. When they finished reviewing the day's updates, she gathered her notes and walked toward the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for staying patient, for caring in ways you don't say out loud." Corvin stood still, caught off guard more by her understanding than by her words. "I don't always know how to show it," he admitted. "You do," she replied. "More than you think." Their exchange lasted only seconds, but it left the room warmer once she stepped out. In the tower built on discipline and distance, soft moments like these had become their new rhythm, quiet reminders that safety wasn't the only thing forming between them. Selene returned to the tower the next afternoon for a follow-up briefing. But something about the way she entered the room made Corvin pause. Her steps were lighter, her shoulders less tense. She wasn't rushing or bracing for impact. She was comfortable here. She set her bag on the chair and glanced at him with a soft, familiar warmth. "Long day?" she asked. Corvin nodded, though the truth was more complicated. His day had been full of meetings, reports, and strategy calls, yet none of it weighed on him the way her presence did, not because she was a burden, but because she changed the quiet around him into something he didn't want to define. Selene sat beside him instead of across the table this time. The shift was small, but he felt it immediately. Their chairs were close enough that he sensed her movement each time she breathed. She reviewed the documents with him, their shoulders nearly touching. Her voice stayed calm, steady, confident. The fear from weeks ago felt distant. Corvin watched her more than he intended, noticing the way she brushed hair behind. Her ear, or the way her expression softened when she understood something. At one point, she lifted her eyes and caught him staring. He looked away first. She smiled first. Neither mentioned it. Later, while he walked her to the elevator, they moved side by side without speaking. The quiet between them wasn't strained or cold. It held meaning, something unspoken, shared, and fragile. Selene stopped at the elevator doors and faced him. "You know," she said gently, "I don't feel watched anymore. I feel supported." Corvin's chest tightened at the word. "I'm glad you feel that way." She held his gaze longer than before. There was trust there. There was something warmer, too. He didn't reach for her. She didn't reach for him. but the space between them felt charged in a way both understood. The elevator opened, and she stepped inside. Before the doors closed, she said, "It's strange. I don't feel alone even when I leave." Corvin didn't move until the doors shut. He stared at the metal surface, realizing something he hadn't allowed himself to say out loud. His life had been predictable, controlled, and distant. Now, because of her, it wasn't. And he didn't miss the old version of himself at all. Corvin returned to his office after walking Selene out, but the room felt different tonight. The same polished desk, the same structured files, the same view over the city, yet none of it carried the sense of control it once did. He sat down, opened a report, and found himself reading the same sentence 3 times without absorbing a single word. His focus drifted back to her, the way she spoke with new confidence, the softness in her eyes when she looked at him, the steadiness she carried into the courtroom because he stood behind her. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand across his jaw in a slow, thoughtful movement. This wasn't how he lived. He didn't linger on emotions. He didn't allow people into his private world. He didn't stay awake thinking about anyone outside his responsibility. But Selene had changed the rules without trying. He remembered the night he found her trembling in the suite, the fear she tried to hide behind quiet strength. He remembered the long hours he spent outside her door, the unease he felt when danger pressed too close. He remembered the kiss, slow, warm, and honest, breaking through walls he once believed were permanent. He whispered to himself, almost surprised by the honesty of the thought, "She matters." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't complicated. It was simple truth. For years, Corvin valued distance. It kept people safe from him, and it kept him safe from needing anyone. But Selene had shifted something deep inside him, something steady and quiet that refused to disappear. He stood and walked toward the window. The city lights reflected faintly against the glass, a backdrop to the thoughts he couldn't push aside. He cared about her. More than he planned, more than he expected, more than he knew how to say. He wasn't struggling with her safety alone anymore. He was struggling with the idea of losing the closeness that came with protecting her. And he realized with clear, unsettling certainty he didn't want to go back to who he was before she walked into his office. Selene hadn't broken his rules. She revealed they weren't rules at all, just walls waiting for the right person to approach. Selene walked home from the tower that night with a calm she hadn't felt in months. The city lights glowed against the pavement, and for once, her steps weren't rushed. She didn't keep checking behind her. She didn't brace for danger when someone passed by. She felt free. At her apartment, she set her bag on the table and sat on the edge of her bed. The room looked the same, small, simple, quiet, but she wasn't the same woman who used to come home here trembling after a long day. She opened her window slightly, letting the night breeze move through the space. Then she closed her eyes and let her thoughts settle. She had spent weeks living frightened of shadows, of cars slowing near her building, of anonymous calls. Her world had shrunk to survival. But today, she felt control again, strength again, light again, and a large part of that came from Corvin. She remembered how he stood behind her in the courtroom, calm and unshaken, how he steadied her wrist when she panicked, how he adjusted the lights in her room because he noticed she disliked darkness, how he whispered she wasn't alone, how he kissed her only when she stepped close and opened her heart. None of that came from duty. It came from care, quiet, steady care. Selene took a slow breath and whispered into the stillness, "I want more than fear. I want a life that feels safe and full." And she knew exactly what that meant. She wanted to keep walking forward, not backward. She wanted a future that wasn't shaped by danger, but by choice. She wanted to wake up feeling secure, not cautious. She wanted someone who made her stronger without dimming her own voice. She wanted Corvin in that future, not as a shield, not as a temporary protector, but as someone she trusted and cared for deeply. This feeling no longer scared her. It grounded her. It warmed her. Selene lay back on the bed and let a small smile form. The danger had pulled them together, but the connection had grown because they chose it. She no longer wanted to hide from life. She wanted to live it, bravely, openly, and with someone who saw her, truly saw her. And as she drifted towards sleep, one truth settled in her heart. She wasn't returning to her old life. She was stepping into something new. Selene stepped onto the balcony of Corvin's residence, the same place where fear once chased her into his arms. Tonight, the scene felt different. The air was calm. The city lights stretched far into the distance, steady and bright. Nothing followed her here now. No danger, no shadows, no weight on her chest. She walked slowly toward the railing, resting her hands lightly on the cool surface. This was where she first understood she wasn't alone. This was where his voice steadied her on the night they fled the tower. This was where he pulled her close and told her he would not lose her. That memory no longer carried fear. It carried warmth. She closed her eyes and let the silence settle around her. The world below moved on with its usual rush, but here on this balcony, everything felt still, safe, gentle. Corvin opened the door behind her. His footsteps were quiet, but she felt him before she heard him. He didn't speak right away. He stood near the doorway, watching her take in the view. "You came back here," he said softly. Selene turned toward him, her face lit by the faint glow from inside the room. "This place changed my life," she said. "I needed to see it again, but without fear, without running." Corvin stepped closer, his expression deepening as he took in her calm posture. Her steady breath, the peace she hadn't felt the first time she stood here. He didn't interrupt her moment. He didn't rush forward. He simply stayed close, silent and present, as she reclaimed the balcony where everything began to shift. Selene looked back at the city and whispered, "I'm not the same woman who stood here before." Selene kept her eyes on the skyline a moment longer before she spoke. Her voice held no fear, only quiet clarity. "I spent so long reacting to danger," she said. "Every step I took was about surviving. Every decision I made came from fear." She drew a slow breath, letting it steady her. "But that's not the life I want anymore. I don't want to shrink when something goes wrong. I don't want to freeze every time a shadow moves. I want a life that feels calm, one that feels honest, one where I can breathe." Corvin listened with full attention, his expression unreadable but his eyes soft. He waited for her to continue, sensing she wasn't done. "I want a simple life," she said, turning toward him. "Not perfect, not quiet all the time, just real. A life where I'm not scared to wake up. A life where I can work, help people, come home, and feel safe enough to laugh at something small." A faint smile touched her lips at the thought. Then she stepped a little closer, not enough to assume anything, but enough to show intention. "And I know one thing for certain," she said gently. "I don't want that life alone." Corvin's breath shifted, slow and controlled, but his gaze held steady with hers. Selene added softly, "A simple life means nothing if it's empty. I want it with someone who sees me, someone who makes me stronger without taking pieces from me." She paused, her voice soft but sure. "I want a simple life, but with you." The words fell between them like truth finally given a voice. Corvin didn't speak, not yet. He absorbed every syllable, every shift in her tone, every ounce of trust wrapped in that sentence. And for the first time in a long time, he felt his guarded world open. ChatGPT said, Chapter 10, Part 2 talks about the life she wants. Selene kept her eyes on the skyline a moment longer before she spoke. Her voice held no fear, only quiet clarity. "I spent so long reacting to danger," she said. "Every step I took was about surviving. Every decision I made came from fear." She drew a slow breath, letting it steady her. "But that's not the life I want anymore. I don't want to shrink when something goes wrong. I don't want to freeze every time a shadow moves. I want a life that feels calm, one that feels honest, one where I can breathe." Corvin listened with full attention, his expression unreadable, but his eyes soft. He waited for her to continue, sensing she wasn't done. "I want a simple life," she said, turning toward him. "Not perfect, not quiet all the time, just real. A life where I'm not scared to wake up, A life where I can work, help people, come home, and feel safe enough to laugh at something small. A faint smile touched her lips at the thought. Then she stepped a little closer, not enough to assume anything, but enough to show intention. "And I know one thing for certain," she said gently. "I don't want that life alone." Corvin's breath shifted, slow and controlled, but his gaze held steady with hers. Selene added softly, "A simple life means nothing if it's empty. I want it with someone who sees me, someone who makes me stronger without taking pieces from me." She paused, her voice soft but sure. "I want a simple life, but with you." The words fell between them like truth, finally given a voice. Corvin didn't speak, not yet. He absorbed every syllable, every shift in her tone, every ounce of trust wrapped in that sentence. And for the first time in a long time, he felt his guarded world open. "Pookie is ready for part 3 when you are." You said, P. ChatGPT said, Chapter 10, Part 3, A Simple Life, but with you. Her words hung in the quiet air, soft, steady, and sure. Corvin stood still, letting the meaning of them settle through him. For a man who lived on control, on logic, on distance, this moment felt like stepping into unfamiliar ground. But instead of fear, he felt something warm settle in his chest. He took a single step toward her. "Selene," he said quietly, "do you know what you're asking?" She nodded without hesitation. "I do. I'm not asking for luxury or protection or to be hidden away. I'm asking for presence, for honesty, for someone who doesn't disappear when life becomes hard. And you've already shown me all of that." Corvin exhaled slowly, as if releasing years of guarded silence. "You could have chosen distance," he said. "After everything you went through, you could have walked away, built a life far from danger, far from me." Her eyes softened. "I didn't want distance. I wanted truth. And every time you protected me, you showed me who you are, not the man people whisper about, not the cold figure they imagine. You showed me loyalty, care, and strength that never raised its voice." She lifted a hand slightly, not touching him yet, but close enough for him to feel the pull. "You gave me safety when I needed it, and now I want something more than safety." Corvin swallowed, his voice lower when he spoke again. "What do you want?" Selene answered without looking away. "You." A quiet moment passed. No rush, no tension, only truth. Corvin felt something shift inside him, something he had kept buried under years of walls and rules. He had wanted her, long before he admitted it, long before the kiss, long before he allowed himself to imagine anything past the crisis. Hearing her say it first broke something open. He stepped closer, the space between them now only a breath apart. "You want a simple life with me," he murmured. She nodded. "And I want you in it." This time, he didn't hide the way her words reached him. He didn't push back. He didn't run from the softness rising in his chest. Instead, he let it in. Corvin looked at her for a long moment, the night air settling around them like a quiet witness. He wasn't a man who spoke easily about himself. His life was built on silence, on measured choices, on keeping everything locked away where no one could reach. But Selene had seen past all that without trying. And now she was asking for truth. A truth he had carried quietly since the night everything changed. He drew in a slow breath and stepped close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "There's something you should know," he began, voice low but steady. "When you walked into my office that first day, I didn't expect anything to shift. You were a case, a responsibility." He paused, searching for the right words. "But then you looked at me with fear you tried to hide. You trusted me with your truth, and something in me changed." Selene held her breath. "I've lived most of my life at a distance," Corvin continued. "No attachments, no distractions, nothing that made me feel vulnerable." His eyes met hers, honest and open. "But the night I stayed in your room, watching you breathe, making sure no one touched you, I realized I cared. More than I should have." The confession surprised even him, a truth he never planned to voice. Selene's eyes softened, her heartbeat quickening. Corvin stepped closer again, his voice dropping to a gentle tone. When I told you not to walk alone, it wasn't only about the danger. It was because the thought of losing you did something to me. Something I didn't have a name for." He swallowed, fighting the last barrier inside him. "But now I know what it is." Selene waited, her eyes steady on his. "I want a life with you too," Corvin said. "Something simple, something real, something built on trust, not fear." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear with slow care. "You changed me, Selene. You made me want more than work and silence. You made me want us." Her breath trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. No threats, no danger, no running, just truth, quiet, steady, and deep. Selene's breath caught at Corvin's confession. She stepped closer, drawn not by fear or uncertainty, but by the calm truth they now shared. The balcony felt smaller, warmer, quieter, as if the world around them understood the weight of this moment. Corvin lifted his hand, touching her cheek with a softness she never thought he possessed. His fingers moved slowly, as though he wanted to memorize the lines of her face. "You changed my rules," he said gently, "and I didn't even see it happening." Selene leaned into his hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't lose yourself. You opened your heart. There's nothing wrong with that." He exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. Then, with the same care he used the first time, but without fear of crossing a line, Corvin lowered his forehead to hers. Their breaths mingled, quiet and warm. Selene placed her hand lightly on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. Corvin searched her eyes one last time. "This time, I don't want to hold back." "You don't need to," she whispered. He closed the remaining space between them. The kiss was slow, not rushed, not overwhelming, not born from danger or desperation. It was gentle, intentional, real. His hand slid to the back of her neck with careful pressure, guiding her closer without demanding more. She lifted her face, welcoming the tenderness that wrapped around them both. There were no walls here, no alarms, no threats pulling them apart, just two hearts meeting in a moment that felt quietly perfect. When they parted, Selene kept her hand on his chest, steady and warm. Corvin brushed his thumb across her cheek, his breath touching her skin. "That felt right," Selene said softly. Corvin nodded once. It felt honest. They didn't rush into another kiss. They didn't try to define everything at once. They simply stood there, close, connected, certain. The kiss hadn't changed everything this time. It confirmed everything they had already become. They moved back from the railing, their fingers brushing before falling naturally into each other's hands. Corvin didn't overthink the gesture. Selene didn't question it. Their hands fit together with an ease that felt earned, not rushed. Inside the room, the lights were warm, casting a calm glow across the floor. Corvin led her in, not with authority, but with quiet intention. Their steps matched without effort, as though they had been moving in sync far longer than they realized. Selene sat on the edge of the couch, and Corvin lowered himself beside her. Not too close, not too far. A respectful closeness, shaped by weeks of shared danger and slow trust. She turned slightly toward him. "So what happens now?" she asked. Corvin rested his elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely. "Now," he said, "we stop living in reaction to fear. We start living in choice." Selene smiled at that. "And what do you choose?" He looked at her with a steady gaze. "You, not as someone I need to protect, but as someone I want beside me." Her heart warmed at the clarity in his voice. He continued, "Protection was the beginning. Partnership is what I want moving forward. You're strong on your own. I see that. But I want us to face things together, not because you need it, but because I want to be part of your life." Selene nodded slowly, touched by his honesty. "And I want to be part of yours, not just the safe parts, all of it." Corvin studied her expression, making sure she understood. "My life isn't always calm. There are decisions, risks, responsibilities." Selene reached for his hand, stopping his words with a steady touch. "I'm not asking for perfection," she said. "I'm asking for honesty and presence. We can handle everything else as it comes." He watched their hands for a moment, hers soft, warm and sure, his strong, steady, and now willing to open. Partnership didn't mean losing control. It didn't mean abandoning who he was. It meant sharing strength, sharing burdens, sharing life. He nodded once. Then we build something real. Together. Selene leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. Not in dependence. In connection. Corvin rested his cheek softly on her hair. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in a quiet room. He felt chosen. He felt seen. He felt ready for a life he never thought he would want. A life with her. Days turned into weeks, and life settled into a calm rhythm neither of them had ever known before. The danger that once pressed against every corner of Selene's world faded into background noise. The legal process moved forward, steady and predictable. Corvin still monitored it, but his focus wasn't fear anymore. It was the future. Selene returned to the clinic full-time, walking in with a confidence her co-workers immediately noticed. She listened to clients with a stronger voice, no longer shrinking from difficult stories. She no longer carried her fear home. She carried growth. Corvin watched her flourish from a distance and up close. She visited the tower often, sometimes for updates, sometimes just to see him. Their conversations shifted from case files and safety protocols to lighter things. Her day, his quiet habits, the music she played when she couldn't sleep, the meals he always forgot to eat unless reminded. They didn't rush anything. Their connection unfolded slowly, naturally, like something returning to its rightful place. He healed too, though he rarely spoke about it. Corvin had lived most of his adult life behind a controlled shell. He kept his emotions locked away, convinced they distracted from purpose. But with Selene, his guard lowered in small, meaningful ways, allowing her to see parts of him he once hid. She noticed the way he leaned back in his chair when he felt comfortable. He noticed the way she relaxed her shoulders when he entered the room. She learned he liked silence not to avoid people but to think clearly. He learned she liked soft lights and open windows because they made her feel free. Together, they built a rhythm grounded in gentle honesty. One night, Selene brought dinner to the tower, simple dishes she made at home. Corvin cleared his desk, moved aside a stack of reports without hesitation, and they sat across from each other sharing quiet laughter at their uneven portions. Later, when she rested her hand on his, he didn't pull away. He folded his fingers around hers, holding on with a steady acceptance that spoke louder than any declaration. Both of them had scars, emotional wounds shaped by fear, distance, and loneliness. But they didn't heal by pretending those scars didn't exist. They healed by being present, by choosing each other in small, everyday ways, by offering strength without pride and comfort without shame. That healing wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady, warm, real, and for both of them, it was enough. Selene stood on the balcony again a few weeks later, the same soft glow of the city reflecting in her eyes. Corvin joined her, sliding the door open with a quiet ease that told her he no longer felt like a distant figure in this home. He stepped beside her, close but unpressured, their hands brushing before she slipped hers into his. Neither spoke for a moment. They didn't need to. Everything they lived through, fear, danger, trust, courage, tenderness, had led them here. Not to perfection, but to truth. To a connection built on steady acts that never demanded attention, only understanding. Selene turned to him. "I used to think strength meant doing everything alone," she said softly. "But I was wrong. Strength grows when someone stands with you. When someone sees you fully and doesn't step away." Corvin looked at her with a calm warmth he never showed anyone else. "You stood on your own when it mattered most," he said. "And when you let me stand with you, it changed both of us." She smiled. "Life doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be honest." He nodded once, tightening his fingers around hers. And protected by truth, they leaned toward each other, foreheads touching lightly. No fear, no running. Only peace born from everything they survived and everything they chose together. They were partners now, not because danger forced them together, but because healing kept them close. They learned that love didn't need dramatic gestures or loud declarations. It grew through steady actions, quiet loyalty, and moments that shaped trust. Life lesson for viewers: love grows through steady actions. Truth protects. And strength rises when two hearts meet at the right time. Corvin brushed a final kiss on Selene's forehead. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth settle deep. Together, they stepped inside, toward a future built not on fear, but on choice. Tell us in the comments, which moment in this story touched you the most? And if you want more stories from Lord of Hearts, please subscribe, like and share to support the channel.